Councilmember Gregory.
Here.
Councilmember Waring.
Here.
Councilmember Seekings.
Here.
Councilmember Shea. Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Appel.
Here.
Councilwoman Jackson.
Here.
Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here.
I will do Councilmember Safran again. He can get his name.
So if you would like to join us, Councilmember Gregory will lead us in an invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Father in heaven, let thy will be done. As we face the challenge, and we all know what it is, help us to be prepared. Help us to do all we can to make sure that the citizens of this city and this great state remain safe from all harm. Help us as council members to do all that we can to help our constituents to understand where we are as a city and the challenges that we may have to face. God, let us devote ourselves to not just pray, but to get up off our knees and help make things happen. All these and other blessings in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. I think most of you know this, but just in case, we were called to evacuate the building. These are the two exits from the main council chambers, and there's also a door off the room to my right. In that event, do not use the elevator, but please just use the stairways going downstairs and the one stairway going out front. Very unlikely, but just want everyone to be aware of our exits. So I did want to let council know that somebody gave me a copy of the April edition of Southern Living magazine, in which Charleston is designated for the fourth year in a row as the best city in the South. And I know we've almost become accustomed to accolades and maybe don't feel like we need them from a visitor's point of view anymore, but it kind of comes at a good time when international travel is being suspended and reduced, and this magazine mostly is targeted towards people that live close enough to us that could drive here and wouldn't have to get on an airplane. But what made me really note the article was that it was all about the Gullah Geechee culture and its influence on Charleston, Gullah Geechee cuisine. It's about the coming of the International African American Museum, and many of our local restaurants are highlighted here, including Martha Lou's Kitchen and Hannibal's and Charlie Brown Seafood and My Three Sons and Bertha's. And so it's kind of a new perspective that I think we can all enjoy and delight in a way, and long deserved. And I think it's a kind of harbinger of things to come with the coming of the African American Museum, a real increase in awareness of our Gullah Geechee culture. And so I thought that was notable. I'll put it in the record. So the other thing I would like to announce without objection from council, when we get to the report on the Health and Wellness Advisory Committee that Councilmember Shealy is going to give, that we also have an additional update on the COVID-19 coronavirus and what all the city staff has been working on in that regard. So I wouldn't say it's a change in the agenda, because we did talk about that at length at the Health and Wellness Committee, but I just wanted to let you know we'd like to add an update more generally on that topic. So next I'd like to invite to join me representatives of the American Red Cross, and I see Louise Williams, their regional executive, I think Also with us is Ashley Henyon, and who else? Lou Hammond is a board member. Y'all come on up here with me if you don't mind, and I'll read a little proclamation and then ask Louise to say a few words. So, whereas March is American Red Cross Month, the time that we recognize the humanitarian organization that eases people's suffering during life's emergencies right here in the Low Country and across the U.S. and around the world even, whereas the Palmetto, South Carolina region of the American Red Cross has a long history of helping our neighbors in need by delivering shelter, care, and hope during large-scale disasters, making our communities safer through its life-saving home fire campaign, providing life-saving blood, teaching skills and save lives, and supporting our military veterans and families. And I know we rely on the Red Cross these past few years as we've had named storms unfortunately visit the area. But every time there's a fire, it's the American Red Cross who's there to assist the families with emergency shelter and supplies. It just happened last week up in Bridgepoint Apartments, where we had a fire and a couple of families were dislocated. There was the Red Cross every time there to help us. So there are a lot of other statistics here, but I'll get to the bottom line and say, whereas every day people in the community depend on the American Red Cross, whose life-saving mission is powered by the devotion of volunteers, the generosity of donors, and partnerships of community organizations, we dedicate the month of March to all those who support its vital work to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the faces of emergencies. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do hereby proclaim March 2020 as Red Cross Month in the City of Charleston. Louise, please.
I want to thank the City of Charleston for the continued partnership. We are great partners. As the mayor mentioned, we've gotten to know each other pretty well over the last 5 years of local disasters. Thank you for that. Yes, we have a new executive director, Ashley Henyon, for the Low Country Chapter of the American Red Cross, and we couldn't do what we do without our volunteer leadership. And Lou Hammond, our board director that's here with us today, is a good example of that. When you talked about house fires, we respond to a house fire in South Carolina every 4 hours. That's at the request of the fire department to help people. So right now, if we can have a plea, we do have a plea to keep a safe supply of blood to our nation. So if you are healthy, we ask that you go to redcross.org. We need you to give blood. If you're a blood sponsor, we need you to please have a blood drive for us. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So thanks for all you do, and the city sponsors, I think twice a year, our own blood drive. So I hope that city council members are on that email list and will join us next call for a little bloodletting. And I also wanted to mention that a couple of years ago, we have an annual payroll deduction from employees, our city employees, who can donate. It used to be exclusively to the United Way, and nothing against them, they're great. But we added the Red Cross specifically to our designated employee donation from payroll, and so we participate with y'all on that. So that's just a show of our employees' thankfulness and support to you, and your support, acknowledging your support to us. Thank you. All right. So next we have one public hearing on the agenda. That's regarding building construction operations during stated hours. That's the noise ordinance regarding building construction. So would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Please come forward, state your name and address, and I'll ask you to keep your remarks to 2 minutes, please. Please come forward. Try to speak right in the mic.
Thank you. My name's Tom Thompson. I'm appearing on behalf of the Historic Ansonboro Neighborhood Association. And as members overwhelmingly support strict limitations on construction noise. The proposed ordinance is generally consistent with the ordinances of other historic cities, with two important exceptions. First, concrete pouring should not have a blanket exemption that would allow concrete to be poured in residential neighborhoods 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Second, unless a project has already been issued a building permit, the ordinance should be effective immediately. As drafted, the proposed ordinance would permit loud and continuous construction noise for 70 hours a week. If somehow construction schedules have to be extended for projects that can't be completed within this 70-hour window, a possibility that frankly seems remote to me, you can be sure that Charleston's residents would gladly trade a hypothetical construction delay of a couple days for peace and quiet year-round. In conclusion, construction noise is the quintessential livability issue. Hannah needs your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Luke Daniels, live at 17 Halston Place, and I concur with everything he just said. Noise has been a major issue with myself and my neighbors. The Jasper project has kept us up numerous hours, many nights. Please do not allow cement pouring in the middle of the night. Do not grandfather any company, any project. Please stop it immediately. Put livability back where it belongs with the homeowners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Wasn't planning on coming back here, but I checked it out online and had to kind of reflect on the zoning and the changes in Charleston and the type of advocacy that's taking place. I lived in the neck, so the neck is redeveloping. So the question then is, is this a question of a business license and someone getting a business license and having an apolitical person, not a political person, an apolitical person, an administrator, someone to just begin to unilaterally decide what's the best areas to have noise and not to have noise? What's the best area to have noise? Not in his area. Who area is the best place to have noise in? Because it seems like those who have the least amount of money and the least amount of power get all the noise. Or they get the billboards you don't want, the alcohol billboards or whatever. So what I'm trying to figure out with this council, from the spot zoning with MUSC, West Ashley, where are you going with this? Secondly, a question I have is the Attorney General's opinion. You got an Attorney General's opinion on an issue. Does he give opinions all the time, or you requested the opinion as a mayor, or how does that work?
This isn't a question.
I know. I'm asking a question because the Attorney General is over the Planning Enabling Act for the whole state. And you have Tier 3 areas by the Department of Commerce, Tier 2 areas by the Department of Commerce, which those census tracts seem to be low to moderate income, which you're going to have a lot of redevelopment right near these areas like the West Side with the West End and the whole thing. I just think that you can pass the ordinance, but I think it could be challenged by somebody as being kind of like spotty.
Time.
So, Mr. Bryant, this ordinance applies citywide to every neighborhood. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jackie Meany. I live at 34 Hazel Street. First, I want to say thank you to Mayor Tecklenburg, Chairman Waring, and the other members of the Public Works Committee, City Council members, and city staff for listening to our concerns and for crafting a construction noise ordinance that improves the quality of life for all of Charleston. I am grateful for the many hours you spent working on this, and there are only two things I wish you would consider tonight. That is to make it effective immediately and require a special permit for concrete pouring outside of the hours permitted. I urge you to support this ordinance tonight and vote for it. And thank you again. I really do appreciate all that you did. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to be heard on this matter? Seeing none, the matter comes to council.
I move for approval, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion?
I think some explanation needs to be given, in particular on the concrete pours. Just by the climate that we work in, if you pour concrete up in the day, it creates problems. Some of those pours have to start early, in particular on larger projects. I hear you on not having it done, but the reality is we raise the cost of construction for everybody if on occasions we don't let in July, August, and sometimes in June that to happen. So that was the reason for that provision being in there. So, thank you.
And I would note that we added the provision that even though concrete pouring could proceed, that some notification had to be given to the surrounding area when it was planned 48 hours in advance. Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this ordinance is the product of a lot of discussion, a lot of compromise, a lot of give and take. There's something here that people like and some things that people don't like, but we're going to, I think, get this ordinance passed tonight, and if we've got to tweak it some more, we have the opportunity to do that. But I know the residents downtown have been clamoring for this, and I think this is the best we got for right now, and hope we get it approved.
All right. Would anyone else like to be heard? Councilmember Seeking.
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members, the enemy of good is better. I don't think this is perfect, but it has been the product of hard work, and the residents were graceful to come in and thank us, staff, Councilmember Waring. I want to thank them, and particularly my association, Historic Charleston Village and Anson Borough, for coming in and being a part of all this. We'll see how it all goes. We'll monitor it, and if there's some adjustments need to be made, but I would encourage a yes vote tonight, and let's see how this all works going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Councilmember Griffin.
I've been a part of this thing for several months now, and it almost makes me, sick to hear the word construction noise ordinance, because we've talked about this thing for far, far too long. I just want to caution us that, we all agree that our city is diverse, it's vast. We have different pockets of communities. And I would just caution us that we don't spend as much time as we did on this, on some of these other issues that we have coming up. We have real issues that are keeping people out of their homes, and we need to get back to those things. I completely understand that there are some residents that are upset with some noise, but the vast majority of our residents are not complaining about this issue. I don't think that we should spend hours and hours and hours on drafting an ordinance that's going to benefit just a few people, where if we would have allowed this thing to go through the way it was written before, would have been a complete detriment to our community. We would have limited the number of people who can work on their homes privately. Luckily, we've all come to compromises, and we have a way to make that work now. So I'm going to support this the way it is today, but I honestly think we should look back on this thing 9 months to a year, because we're going to be able to pinpoint 2 or 3 locations where this matters, and the rest, I don't think they are. We all know that there's been some complaints against the Jasper. It's one of the largest projects the city's ever seen, just like there were complaints against West Edge. People support projects like that are massive, and others don't. And so we have to weigh the cost and the benefit. But in terms of off the peninsula, it's been crickets on this thing for people complaining. So I just want to make sure that we have our priorities in order. I appreciate that Councilmember Seekings has some different challenges in his district, because it's very historic. But in the future, I still think we need to be looking holistically at how we're going to tackle these issues. So, thank you.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Griffin. I am listening carefully to your words, and I do think that in this case, the hours spent were worth it. I mean, your statement about 2 or 3 sentences in to what you just said, where if we had passed the original one, we would have harmed a lot of people. We would have created unintended consequences. So I do know that, citizens feel like we maybe potentially waste a lot of hours and use a lot of words and go back and forth on dancing on the head of pins, but honestly, and I don't get complaints. I've had 2 or 3 complaints about noise in my neighborhood, and frankly, it's roosters crowing. It's not jackhammers, so much. But we definitely have citizens that we're serving here broadly across our boroughs. My jurisdiction is becoming a very popular place to buy bigger, older lots and subdivide. And we're going to have a lot of that infill activity that nobody is prepared to live next to in a construction phase. So I do think that we spent our time wisely in making this as tight and as pertinent and as meaningful as we can. And we do have the opportunity to review it and work with our livability and our police force to find out where we have complaints and where we do need to drill down to make it even better. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Councilmember
I know
Waring.
I've already spoken, but we really need to give praises to our legal department because they really went back and forth on this one. And each time I'm going to say they did it with a smile. So
Thank you, Sterling.
That's right.
They did it very quiet.
So this vote will be for third reading and ratification, so it will go in effect even though there's that time delay for new projects. Without further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next is the approval of our city minutes from February 11th. Any corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next is our citizens' participation period, and we only have a few people signed up this evening, but I'd ask y'all to keep your remarks to 2 minutes as well. And Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, so to speak?
Yes. We have Anthony Bryant, followed by Muhammad Idris, Mark Knapp, and Luke Daniels.
All right. Again, don't want to be here. February 25th at your meeting, I received back from Scott Harris of the Supreme Court, I went to school in Maryland, regarding my complaint to the Department of Transportation statewide and you. And so I got it back. I have to respond back to it in protest against you and others. And I will be protesting a lot this year and beyond, because that's what I do. And as you expose me, I will expose you. Simple as that. Here's your letter, Mr. Mayor. That's there. So February 25th, 2020, I received that. You just approved some minutes. I submitted to the Supreme Court the 2 policies that concern me in the community as an African-American male of my generation. Not Clyburns, not Warings, not Gregory, not Mitchell's, my generation, which is from 1986 policy, 94 policy, the crime bill, which Biden supported. So at the end of the day, that's what I'm working on. And I'm working on that in the vein of the Third Enforcement Act, which is the Ku Klux Klan Act, right? 1871, pass it along to your presidential candidate. That was supposed to protect African Americans, and the Enforcement Act was supposed to protect us. We hadn't been protected since. So at the end of the day, I'm going to be working on that as when so I'll be at a lot of the public libraries doing my research. I'm not married, I don't have any children. I do whatever what I want to do, whatever I want, right? So I'm going to be working on this, completing this work, finishing this work, and responding within 90 days. So you make sure I get my quiet enjoyment from the back, because public safety is my concern. That's my concern, and my only concern. You know, in Illinois, 300 people were wrongfully accused of a crime they didn't commit. 300? In the state of Texas, 300? That's 600 people wrongfully accused in this country. And majority of them black and poor and Hispanic and white and poor.
Time.
Thank you, sir.
Mark? Oh, no, Mohammed, I'm sorry.
Could I pass these out, Mr. Mayor, to different people?
I'll be happy to pass them on for you.
Oh, okay. To the city council. Evening. It is not the water, it is the pollutant in the water in the city of Charleston. The water is going to continue to beat you behind until you do the right by me and the rest of the good poor people in this city. And it's going to do it severely. The proof that it is not the water is in the picture of George Washington. You see of our first president, George Washington. You see his name, Wash, and 4 letters have wash in it. And when you think about wash, you think of water. Also, there are 10 letters in his name, and if you place a number by each letter as it is numerically in our alphabet, it will add up to 130. And in 130, 13 jumps out at you. Also, if you do the same with the word water, you will get 67. And if you add 6 and 7, you get 13. Getting right to the point, there are 13 of you all. And regardless if you know it or not, 13 is a symbol for government, and water is a symbol for spiritual, clean, and righteous government. So again, it's not the water. It is in the mindset of this administration that is causing the water problem of our wonderful city. I'm the one who can stop the flooding problem in our city immediately. And if you do not accept my solution, you are going to face disaster after disaster. I mean of devastating effect from the creator of the heaven and earth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, kids. Be very frank, I haven't made this kind of statement in about 24 years being here. The new council members, I'm going to tell you, I have been completely disappointed in you. We're in meeting 5, and you're still asking for extra time to find out things. You know, it would have helped if you'd shown up before you got elected, occasionally. But I'm just not really happy. Every time I turn around, I hear, oh, we need a delay. I don't know about this. You need to do your job. That's all I'm asking. Now, next thing. Public Works, $1.3 million of drainage projects. 39% went to one council district. I'm thinking quid pro quo? Somebody getting paid off? But what really concerns me is the fact that the rest of the money was only distributed to 10 other districts. The district that really needs the money got 0. Shadow Moss, Village Green, that entire area out there. That's all we've talked about, the flooding out West Ashley. And they get no money? There's actually, sounds like there's a snake in the woodpile here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So next up is a report from our Health and Wellness Advisory Committee. And as I mentioned, as an adjunct to that, next we'll call on Shannon Scaff, our Emergency Preparedness Director. Councilmember Shealy, if you'd lead off.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Health and Wellness Advisory Committee met last week, March 4th, and Dr. Katie Richardson, the medical director for South Carolina DHEC Low Country, who happens to be a member of our board, gave us a briefing and answered questions on the coronavirus. And as the mayor said, Shannon Scaff will give us an update on that, beyond that. But we've also appointed a special subcommittee out of there from our advisory team to assist Mr. Scaff and to communicate with him and monitor community alerts. We'll be continuing to keep updated on this health concern through Mr. Scaff and through that committee. So some of the other actions this year, because we've met a few times since we've given a report, during our February meeting, Dr. Annie Andrews spoke to the committee on the Be Smart Gun Safe campaign, and she discussed the need for public education campaigns and efforts to engage parents and children, we say children 0 to 17, in understanding the dangers and solutions of keeping guns out of the hands of children. She's encouraged taking every opportunity to reach out to all groups throughout the community, in the neighborhoods, community, faith-based schools, everywhere we can, to share the message of not only talking about gun safety, but the responsibility in storing them properly away from children. Following our meeting, the city's recreation department reached out to Dr. Andrews, and the Charleston Police Department's also made contact to work with school resource officers in our schools, as well as the school district will also be sharing resources. We met with DHEC officials also to discuss vaping and the access to tobacco products among our youth, and to look to ways that city ordinances might possibly assist in enforcement, as well as ways to advance education around tobacco products and vaping. During our January 8th meeting, the advisory committee learned about the concerns with 5G, and later in February, we followed up with support of resolutions that council approved later in February. The committee is working on future spring stakeholder collaborative gatherings to present local data to Tri-County health needs assessments as it relates to our zip codes. And if you hadn't, I don't know if everybody's seen those zip code maps, but they're working on those zip code maps to show what life expectancy is broken down by specific areas. And it's very interesting to see those. But, and we will be bringing in health policy experts from the CDC, Florida, and Spartanburg to assist with risk framing. We'll use social contacts from folks in the room as we open up for discussion between experts and local city folks. So if Mr. Scaff will come and give us an update.
Thank you, Councilmember Shealy. Shannon Scaff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you tonight an update. As of about 45 minutes ago, the latest numbers in South Carolina, we're now at 9 cases. 2 of those are positives and 7 are presumptive positive. Mayor Tecklenburg and city leaders remain in close communication with federal, state, and regional officials, including representatives of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the Center for Disease Control, South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the United States Coast Guard, the Medical University of South Carolina on the situation related to the coronavirus. The city's emergency management team, along with area emergency managers, including MUSC, are meeting regularly to align efforts across all jurisdictions. Additionally, the city has established an area stakeholders committee of the Health and Wellness Committee with representatives from Medical University, public and private schools, and special events coordinators. At a press conference yesterday, Dr. Linda Bell, state epidemiologist for the State Public Health Agency, South Carolina DHEC, stated, quote, "There's no reason at this time to cancel any public events or take any special measures when there is no evidence of ongoing spread in a community," end quote. However, the city continues to consult with DHEC and area medical leaders with regard to the continuation or cancellation of all public events. While the city has no legal authority over cruise ship landings or departures at the State Port Authority, emergency management has been in close contact with the United States Coast Guard and U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, and has been assured that these agencies are monitoring cruise ship arrivals in the Port of Charleston and have the responsibility to take appropriate steps with regard to public safety. They receive detailed passenger and crew member information, including full travel histories prior to all ship arrivals in Charleston, and are actively monitoring for potential coronavirus exposures. With regard to citywide preparations, the city has focused its efforts externally and internally to ensure continuity of operations. Charleston Police and Fire Department have created contingency plans to ensure public safety is maintained at all times, even if staffing levels are reduced significantly due to illness or quarantine. Health and safety information has been posted, and hand sanitizers are now available in all city buildings and workspaces. In total, 900 bottles of hand sanitizer have been ordered for use in city vehicles and shared areas. Custodians have been instructed to disinfect shared common surfaces like doorknobs, counters, etc. Additional personal protective equipment supplies have been ordered for first responders. Employee work-related travel has been limited only to absolutely essential travel. Sick employees, board members, and citizens are asked to remain at home and not attend public meetings to conduct city business. With regard to city protocols to ensure citizen services, the safety and health of employees and citizens are the first consideration in planning for continued operations. Essential operations are being identified that must be performed under all conditions by department. Examples of essential operations would include public safety, police, fire, and emergency management, garbage and sanitation services, payroll, accounts payable, and network operations. Essential personnel and tools and support needed to perform their duties are being identified. With respect to ongoing efforts, we will continue to review all city processes, policies, and procedures to reflect all current recommendations and best practices by our partners. We'll provide reliable COVID-19 resources to citizens via the city's website, and city leaders will remain in close contact with federal, state, local, and medical partners to plan and execute next steps as the situation continues to evolve. This Friday, I will attend a meeting led by Department of Health and Environmental Control on creating a unified path with regard to precautions in a response to COVID-19 for individuals who are housing insecure. This meeting will provide a general update, precautionary strategies for staff and clients, and will serve as the beginnings of a conversation on the development of a localized response plan in the event of a client testing positive. And finally, during the first half of today, I spent time with a few of our MUSC partners, a couple who are in attendance this afternoon, as they are working to mitigate the potential for statewide impacts of COVID-19 by providing free screening via their telehealth network. Anyone who would like to consult with an MUSC doctor can do so at musc.care. If a patient is identified through a healthcare system via virtual urgent care as needing to be tested for COVID-19, they will be provided with a doctor's order and directed to the testing site at West Ashley Medical Plaza at the Citadel Mall location on Sam Rittenberg. This effort serves two purposes. The first is to maintain the integrity of the local healthcare infrastructure, which is to protect employees as well as visitors of the MUSC complex from any potential exposure to the COVID-19 virus. The second is to relieve some of the strain related to personal protective equipment supplies by alleviating the need to conduct a terminal clean following each patient encounter. Each encounter in a hospital environment requires extensive cleaning that leads to increased depletion of personal protective equipment supplies across the nation. People who have not received a doctor's order for testing will not be seen at this location. Testing is done at the location by appointment only. The testing location will be operational Monday through Friday from 11 to 3. Each day, an operating capacity will be scalable to meet testing needs as the situation evolves. And I'm told that scalable, they can look at upwards to 60 to 70 a day if they needed to for testing. They are working with several local partners, first responders, and emergency managers to ensure safe and effective operations. EMS will be staged on site to respond if there are any medical issues for staff or patients. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Scaff? Councilmember Waring.
I want to thank Mr. Scaff for giving me a call today to give me heads up on the services that's going to be rendered by MUSC over at the West Ashley Medical Plaza over there. As a matter of fact, information on this is beginning to be shared around the world. Some of the testing that's going to be done over there, as I understood, they were doing over in Korea. So they thought one of those best practices would be applied here to ramp up free testing on a virtual scale. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming today to let everybody know how we're making that testing available, in particular for free, for all those that were willing to come up and hopefully be tested.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So I want to shout out to Shannon and all our emergency management staff, and I think that tells the seriousness of the city's efforts with regard to coronavirus 19. We are treating this as serious as a hurricane or other potential emergency in our city. It happens to be a public health nature as opposed to a weather issue, but many of the same incident command and control procedures apply, and the networking of information between the city, the county, the state, and our partners, I think has been remarkable. We're now on literally daily phone calls, sharing information. A special thanks, there are many partners, but DHEC is, of course, very important in this matter. But we got a shout out to the Medical University of South Carolina, as you just did. Really best practices. For them to set up immediately a telemedicine screening effort throughout our state is remarkable. And now, to tell you the truth, when testing is in some people's opinion way behind where it ought to be, for them to initiate this drive up real-time testing to occur starting next Monday?
Would be Thursday.
We're shooting for Thursday, we're waiting for
Starting tomorrow?
Looking at Thursday, sir.
Starting this Thursday. I would say Charleston is way ahead of the curve. We're blessed that South Carolina has only had 9 cases so far. As it turns out, 7 of them are in Camden, and only 1 in Charleston and 1 in Spartanburg. So I think those are the numbers. So it's a fluid event, though. I mean, it's dynamic, it's changing. It could be, we're watching the numbers across the country and the world at the rate of increase. We'll have to take into account and study this, keep an open mind, and be looking at the facts and figures every day, and relying on our health and medical professionals to give us advice moving forward. So in the meantime, my mantra has become to keep calm. This is what they did in Britain before, with the outset of World War II. Keep calm, wash your hands, which leads to the discussion about all those other hygiene practices, and carry on. So we can't panic over this matter, but we can be prepared and take all reasonable steps with our partners and be thankful for them, but try to keep everything going as well as we can while we prepare for whatever may come. So thanks for the update. Any further questions, Councilmember Jackson?
I just had a definition question. You said presumptive positive. Can you tell us what that means?
Yes, ma'am. Appreciate the question. So as I understand it, presumptive is the test has made it up to DHEC. They've reviewed it. They're not the final authority. CDC is the final authority. So they'll look at it. It'll show presumptive positive to DHEC. They'll send it off to CDC, and the CDC is the final say on the test.
So by the time someone would be in that condition, they would be quarantined?
Yes, ma'am.
Advised to quarantine?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other, I don't want to fearmonger, but I do think that the people that I've heard from, the obvious wild card that we really can't control is the cruise industry and the disembark of passengers. And I know you said the Coast Guard is closely monitoring who comes off the ship and takes all their history, and but do they also have medical personnel? Is it possible that they would catch somebody who might, be presumptive or in a condition that they wouldn't know just based on where they traveled?
Yeah, if I can quote 42 CFR 71.2. Like that?
That's pretty impressive. You may.
Thank you, Mayor. The master of a ship destined for a U.S. port shall immediately report any death or illness of passengers or crew members to to the quarantine station at or nearest the port at which the ship will arrive. 96 hours, if I'm correct, Mark, is when a ship is required by law, by federal law, to report anything, a symptom that would be in line with a communicable disease. That would start a chain of communications between everybody from CDC to our local first responders and EMS, with of course the Coast Guard and Customs and Border Protection leading the way on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
Councilmember Shade and then Griffin.
Shannon, correct me if
Excuse
I'm-
me, Mr.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to thank Councilmember Shealy and your office and our partners in putting together. I read the press release that was issued earlier today, and I think that what's important with all of this is this word called transparency. The more information we have, the better off I think the community will be served. And I know we're doing that, and I just think that continue the transparency that you were doing so far is critical. So we know what's going on, what's taking place. As Councilmember Jackson brought out, of course, the number one question is going to be cruise ships coming in town. So as much information as we can share with our constituents, I think is critically important as to ongoing developments, if any, that transpire. So thank you all for what y'all have done, and let's keep the transparency up.
Member Griffin? All right. Anyone else? Terrific. Thank you for the report.
Yes, sir.
Next, we have a couple appointments up. One is a reappointment to the Planning Commission, Mr. Lassane. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next are reappointments and new appointments to the West Ashley Revitalization Commission.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilmember Shealy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm very happy that our council members, Waring and Brady, are on here now. Thank you for stepping up and taking those. I think we've got a good group for the West Ashley Revitalization Committee. I just want to mention one thing, maybe Councilman Shade and Mr. Mayor, that we do have a representative from the St. Andrews PSD there. The St. Andrews Parks and Playgrounds operates a little differently than, say, the City Recreation Department does. So I want to throw that out there for consideration, that maybe we include the St. Andrews Parks and Playground in there as well, because they don't really report up to the Public Service District. They've got their own commission, and I'd just like to throw that out there for consideration. So.
We have been in contact with them and coordinated with them, and you're right, that they are a separate entity, and so we've been in communication with them, and we will continue to do that.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Griffin.
I'm interested, what exactly is on the horizon for the West Ashley Revitalization Commission? Because I know we approved Plan West Ashley well over a year ago, and then there was some good public meetings directly after, but it seems like it's gone kind of quiet lately.
I can assure you we're anything but quiet. We've been very busy. We've moved our meetings to meet every other month. And tomorrow at 5:30, we'll have our March meeting. So our new appointees, I hope they'll all be able to attend. And you'll get a review of past year of what we've accomplished, and it's quite a list. And we'll share that with all committee members as to what we have done. In particular, what's transpired over at the Medical University at Citadel Mall, and the plans moving forward with the Sumar site at the old Piggly Wiggly site. So those are just the highlights, but there are other items that we've been addressing as well.
Councilmember Griffin.
Particularly that Sumar site, because, I mean, unbelievably, here we are in another year, and $3 million we spent on literally nothing so far. So, you know, I remember a couple months ago, we talked about potentially having a public service building there and having, you know, a municipal building, but then those designs kind of went away, and I haven't heard anything else from that in several months now. And I mean, how are we going to afford it anyway? You know, I think that at some point we got to unbury that thing and bring it to the committee and eventually to council and make it some decisions about what we should do with that site, because right now it's one of the biggest eyesores in this whole city.
Well, I disagree with you. It's been an eyesore, Councilmember Griffin, but we did a process in making sure that the community was engaged into what they wanted out there, with a very large series of community meetings with folks in West Ashley. We had 2 of those, as a matter of fact, I think. We've bid out the design. We're working on the person who was the successful bidder on that, and we're moving forward with bringing that. So hopefully we'll have something more concrete in the immediate future, but we've not been sitting back on that. That's been pressing that very forward, very hard.
So I would report that council did approve, an RFP, request for qualifications, maybe it was, towards the end of last year, and we only had one response from Landmark Development Company. We've met with their representatives, and now they're drilling down on a proposal that we would bring back to council. But we are working on with them to bring you back something, and it includes those same things you mentioned, including the civic building, and just kind of, I guess behind the scenes a little bit, I've been keeping my ear out for potential tenants that could help share that building with us, so all of the expense wouldn't be on us. And the thought, I think it was promoted by council here, that a goodly portion of the property would actually perhaps return to the private sector and be developed so it would get back on the tax rolls and add to our TIF district. But we're exploring possibilities to share that civic building with us for civic uses. So, and a couple of them I think could be pretty exciting. So we are working on the effort, I must say. And I did want to point out, and there may be others here of the new members, but I wanted to shout out, introduce Mary Peters, if you don't know her. Mary, if you'd stand and be recognized. She's one of our new commission members that we'll vote on, and she had a successful business, West Ashley Care for Life, right there on Wapu Road for many years, employing many people, West Ashley, so I appreciate your willingness to serve. Councilmember Griffin.
So, RFQ that we pushed through, I remember from, I think it was November or October of last year.
Yes, sir.
If we're still looking at pushing a large part of this back to the private sector, aren't we going to screw up that RFQ if they're designing something for us, whereas we're not? If we're talking about putting it back in the private sector, shouldn't that private sector component be part of the dialogue of how this building is made and that sort of thing? I'm a little confused if we aren't really sure what we're doing yet, and we've got a bunch of designs together, and then we want to put it back in the private sector. Aren't we pigeonholing ourselves from who might want that building? Because if we're looking at selling off a large part of it, it doesn't make sense to me that we do all the design work for a building for us. That scares me a little bit.
Well, last fall, we brought, the design ideas that we had that guided the RFP. So the thought is that the developer would kind of partner with us and complete the vision for what the public process and the city process has generated so far. So we're looking to the private sector to help us get a project done at the end of the day. Yeah, Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, coming on this, I think there's some exciting opportunities there. One of the things we can crystallize is revenue that the West Ashley Revitalization Commission at this point have not done. I hope we will do that going forward. And doing a particular, let's call it a PUD for that site, the city can guide what type, hopefully private sector uses and public sector uses, and hopefully coalesce around that site. So I think, and there's some things floating around right now that you can't really speak hard to right now, but there's some exciting opportunities that can create some synergies in that location. So I think I'm looking forward to going on to it, because right now, the chairman over there is broke. I'm convinced he's not going to be broke. If Carl and myself and Ms. Peters and join in with the team that's already there, we can make some good things happen. So now I will be abstaining from this, so I don't think it's right for me to vote on my own appointment. So.
Thank you. So any further discussion on the commission membership? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next, we have a brief update from Jacob Lindsay on our comprehensive plan efforts. Jacob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is just a very brief introduction to the comprehensive plan. Over the course of the next year, we will be creating a new comprehensive plan. And I say we because I mean everyone in this room, everyone who are our stakeholders in the community, and all of the residents of this city together will be working on this. And to just give you a very brief introduction and run through a few slides about the basics of the comprehensive plan. First of all, this is required, of course, by state law. Every 10 years, the city has to create a new one. Every 5 years, we have to update it. And we are in one of those years, and we are required to bring forward a new plan. By state law, the role of the Planning Commission is to develop this plan. And it is the reason that the Planning Commission exists. They do many other things, but at the core, our department and the commission are bound up in the comprehensive planning process, so our cities have a guiding vision. Your role, ultimately, is to adopt this plan in all of its details. You are the decision makers in the adoption of this plan. But there's more to it than that. That's what the state statutes say. But we're going to ask you to come along with every step of this process, depending on how much you want to and are able to. We will make sure that you are involved in every single event, every single meeting, and every single key decision, which you'll see in our schedule as we go forward. Now, the plan has 9 elements mandated by state law. We're going to add the 10th, which is resilience. This has been talked about being adopted at the state level. We're just going to do that because that's what we do. So there will be 10 components: population, economic development, natural resources, cultural resources, community facilities, housing, land use, transportation, priority investment, and resilience. That's why it's called a comprehensive plan, because you really look at all the elements of our city as we move forward over the next 10 years. And finally, just as an orientation to the state law, those 10 elements and what it says under each one of those elements constitute the Planning Commission's recommendation to you. Their job is to look at these issues, and they recommend to you the best practices. Now, basics, right? Some basics in terms of what the plan does and doesn't do. First of all, it makes recommendations about the future. We all know that. And it uses objective information and analysis. This is where we're doing things a little bit differently from how we have in the past. We're going to incorporate input from everyone, not just the people who are always at the microphone, but from the working mom who never gets to the microphone. We're going to make sure that we use techniques to listen to all of the members of the community. And the other thing that it does is it informs daily decisions. As you know, when Christopher gives recommendations from Planning Commission, he says the comprehensive plan says this, Planning Commission voted this, staff says this. Every time we make a decision about zoning, we look at this plan, and it is our daily operating environment. What the plan doesn't do is it doesn't change zoning. Very important. It only makes recommendations. Changes in zoning can only be made by you, and that's a separate process. So the plan itself does not change base zoning, it just recommends. It doesn't change stormwater regulations, I'm sure much to Mr. Fountain's delight. It doesn't change any of those things that he's just been through the entire process of setting along with everyone else. It doesn't change anything about taxation. It doesn't interact with TIFs. It doesn't change anything about taxes or tax rates. And it doesn't make detailed policy recommendations that are already covered in other plans. We have plans for many, many other things, from transportation to capital investments. It doesn't change any of those things. This is really focused on the long-range vision of growth for our city. Now, just a few more slides. You all, I'm sure, are familiar with the old Century 5 plan. It's been named that since, well, 20 years before. And I could never figure out what the Century 5 was for because we're celebrating our 350. So we're changing that. The name goes away, first of all. And there are 4 things that really differentiate this. First of all is that sea level rise and climate change are the first priority. Our world has changed, and this plan will reflect that. The second thing is that affordability and diversity are prioritized. We recognize the housing crisis that we are in, as Ms. Natasha Hicks said in her wonderful report, and this master plan will be a part of that solution. The third thing is that it is going to be data-based, using the best objective analysis. Our job, and the job of the consultants, as we'll talk about, is to provide you all with objective information so you can make great informed decisions. And that's what this plan will do. And the fourth thing is it's going to be collaborative. It will be a plan for and by the stakeholders. Now, who are those folks? Who are the stakeholders, and what is this collaboration? We do have some consultants coming on that are going to help us. This is not going to be led by a single consultant. This will not be the Andres Dewani plan or the Victor Dover plan. It certainly won't be the Jacob Lindsay plan. It is going to be by all of us. And the consultants will help us do 4 key things. The first is to integrate the Dutch Dialogue's recommendations. So this plan follows the groundwork that was laid by the Dutch Dialogues. The second thing is to help us analyze the impacts of sea level rise and climate change to a level that we can then put into the plan and make operational. We have great information so far, but our request to these consultants is give us the data that we can make into real land use recommendations. The third thing is to analyze housing affordability and housing supply, again, at a level that we have not yet done, to provide us with real concrete information. And the fourth is to assist with meeting logistics and community engagement. The role of the staff is to facilitate the process. That's what we're going to be doing. And then the role of the community is to assist us with identifying the needs and the goals. We're going to ask the community to become our partners, to identify what goals we should be setting in this plan. And most importantly, to give input online and in public meetings at every step of the way. Okay, almost done. Who are those partners? Obviously residents, property owners, neighborhood organizations, institutions and employers, the many community organizations that exist in the nonprofit sector, non-city governments, the DOT, the county, the COG, all of our partner governments, and a collaboration that's already started among city departments themselves. What we have done so far is lay the groundwork for this, which has included best practice research, logistics, and outreach preparation. We've been meeting every other week. We have a great data team, a partnership between our IT department, GIS, and the planning department, compiling all that existing data and collaborating across departments, including with stormwater, with Mark and resilience, Keith and traffic and transportation, really working to make sure that we've got all the city departments working together and on board, not stepping on toes or duplicating efforts. And just the last thing, the timeline in brief, we are in the kickoff period right now, entering into Q2, moving through all the way to approval in Q4, and I know it says 2021 there, as Christopher said earlier. If you want to give the planning department a Christmas present, you could give us an adopted comprehensive plan by the end of the year. Technically, our drop dead date is actually February of 2021, but we would love to be able to wrap this up this year, of course. And we certainly think that we're going to be able to do that. Now, very last thing. And these are some detailed timelines for all of you. If you want to ask questions about these, then I will start. There it is, just the one sheet. As these are coming around, this is a spreadsheet. You don't have to look at this if you don't like spreadsheets. You can just throw this away. If you like spreadsheets, you can look at it in detail. A few things that I want to highlight on, and then I'll end. April, May, and June are going to be very busy for us in the community engagement phase. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is what we're calling learning tours. That means both for us, for staff to learn, as well as for residents to learn how the city has changed and how it will change. And the fourth bullet under the learning tour, public meetings with council members, is very important that I'd like to bring to your attention. We're going to be reaching out to you all this week about scheduling a meeting. We will offer you a public meeting. These will be large public meetings in your district, if you want one. If you'd like to double up with someone near you, my staff would be happy to combine them. I also should not fail to mention that Mr. Kronsberg is engaged in a parks master plan this year, and we will be combining those meetings for efficiency to get the whole community out and make sure that everyone can give us input as we go through this process. So we're going to reach out to you all to schedule those public meetings in your districts as we go. And the last thing that I'll mention, a really great event that we have planned that we're calling the Civic Labs. We would love to have millions of dollars to this comprehensive plan and hire all the best people in the world, but we don't. So what we'd like to do is bring a number of subject matter experts in flooding, climate change, sea level rise, housing affordability to Charleston for a few days of concentrated activity to hear from them and to give key stakeholders and yourselves the ability to interact with these folks who are doing some of the best work around the country. We can't afford to bring them here all year, but maybe we can afford them for a few days in a concentrated burst of activity where we can all learn together about what we should be doing to make our city as good as it can possibly be. So the Civic Labs are going to be a really great event as a part of this. So with all that said, I believe that's my last slide. I know that's a lot of information to download very quickly. You will all be involved in this. This is going to be a really wonderful process as we go forward, and unlike anyone that we've ever had before. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Griffin, then Appel.
Mr. Lindsay, you mentioned incorporating the Dutch dialogues into this comprehensive plan. Are we going to be reaching out to the Dutch? Are we going to incorporate them that way, or are we just going to be taking the document and making sure that it feeds in, or how are we going to do that?
Great question. So, first of all, we have the Dutch dialogues, and we do have a great relationship with all the folks who worked on it. I think that we now, certainly Mark, I know feels like we can pick up the phone and call those folks anytime to get their input. A key part of this, though, is that we are going to bring on a number of consultants, and one of those consultant groups, we are going to ask them to help us both analyze water and integrate that information. So we're going to be asking professionals to look at it independently and help us to integrate it in.
Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. Jacob, first off, thanks for all your hard work and leadership on this issue. You know, we've got a lot of exciting things going on in the city right now, and I can only speak for myself, but this is number one on my list. This is a once every 10-year opportunity for us to set the policy and the vision for the city moving forward. We have a lot of techniques and mechanisms that we have in place to address things like affordable housing and flooding and things of that nature, but this is really where the rubber meets the road. This is the foundation that we set for what I hope to be, and I hope I speak for others on council, some really modern and exciting new zoning techniques that we can really employ to get to the heart of affordability, to get to the heart of where we should and should not be developing, where we want to incentivize development, where we want to significantly restrict development. And let's call it for what it is. That's where we're potentially going on some of these issues. So I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to engage in this process and want to thank everybody for their efforts so far. Thank you.
Right. Councilmember Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and want to echo the comments already made about the work that y'all done on this so far. And I'm very pleased that we've got affordability, housing affordability on one of the top items up there. I think it's critical as to how we're going to address and make sure we can lasso that. Finally, on a comment you made about the citizens' participation in our districts, I would just offer to my colleagues in West Ashley that when we did the plan West Ashley, we divided West Ashley into two sections, I think. The upper West Ashley, which is on one side of 526, and the lower section. So to my colleagues on council, I would invite that maybe those of us whose districts are below 526 would be like a dividing line for us to work together and have our meetings to save some leg time for the members of the planning department.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. You know, I've been coveting these details for a long time, to the extent of bugging you as often as I can. And I agree with Councilmember Appel. I think this is our moment to really help our citizens live into the reality that they've been championing to us over the variety of topics that are obviously hard to ignore at this point in time. That we have a new day of planning and responsibility to take. So I'm very excited to get going. And I just want to be on record that I really appreciate that we're taking the bottom-up approach as opposed to the top-down. I feel that we do have an amazing growing cadre of involved citizens who have earned my respect and the opportunity to really inform us into what is important for their future. You know, I ran for office because of my unborn grandson, and now he's 2, and I want him to have a Charleston that we can be proud of for his all-adult life. So I feel like this feels really good, and anything that we can do to help you keep to the deadlines, be responsive. Please route on us if we don't, return your phone calls and make the plans that you need for us to do, because I do feel like we will take it seriously. But we're also hard to reach sometimes, so be persistent.
Councilmember Gregory.
I'm also excited. This will be my second, though. Second one. I have a couple of questions. One, I'd like to get a sense of our level of accomplishments with respect to the existing 10-year plan, okay? We had goals, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, some of which, sure, may not be applicable at this point. The other thing is, it's very, very important for me, and the mayor, I think, knows what I'm going to say, that community planning and development standing committee play an essential role in the development of this plan. Because if you go to the record, if you go to the ordinance, they're supposed to. The next thing is, we have a lot of plans. We have a consolidated plan, which is our plan for housing and community development, which has a lot of data that I think will probably at some point feed into this plan. I mean, it covers affordability, it covers diversity, it covers affirmatively furthering fair housing, and I can go on and on and on. I'm proud of our city in terms of what we have accomplished thus far. Of course, it's not perfect, but I think that what we've done with regard to implementing our comprehensive plan has been pretty consistent across the board, some of which people are alarmed at because they did not participate in the plan. So when we see massive developments in certain areas of our city, apartments in certain areas of our city, a lot of people don't realize that when we approved the last plan, most, if not all of it, was a part of the plan that this council approved. So to me, it's very, very important, especially for the council members who have not participated in such an exercise, to really dig in, because this plan will affect your district for years to come. Folks didn't understand what was going on in James Island and its urbanization, but it was a part of the plan approved by this body. So for me, I'm excited, but please make sure that Community Planning and Development Standing Committee plays a crucial role in this development. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I'll just add this thought that just occurred to me. You know, when you take a budget and review it, and you kind of having everything justify itself from scratch, you call it zero-based budgeting, right? So I kind of view this as an opportunity to call it zero-based zoning or zero-based master planning, that we're adding these new components that we didn't really consider before, like the sea level rise and the climate change. So that's uncharted territory. But there's nothing wrong with us, you know, starting from scratch, literally. If our citizens don't want to see whatever on a certain part of the city, this will be our chance to incorporate that into our long-range plan and set the future tone for our city. So, and I like the fact that we're calling it the Charleston City Plan. I agree. We just had our 350th birthday, or we are having it this year. So I'm not sure where the Century 5 plan, unless they were looking forward 150 years, so 170 years or whatever. But anyway, we'll get that straight. So thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you. So next is council communications. We have a suggestion and discussion regarding handheld cell phones from Councilmember Griffin.
I don't want to take up too much of your time tonight, guys, because, you know, next meeting is probably more of where we would get through this. I'd like to send this to the Public Safety Committee for the next agenda. But honestly, Buford has already made a resolution to ban handheld devices while driving. They've gone hands-free, or they've sent a resolution to Columbia to do that. 16 states are already hands-free, including Georgia. I do a lot of business in Georgia, so I've seen firsthand the officers, they will pull you. I didn't get pulled, but my friend did. And they issued warnings to start out to especially for travelers, But signs are posted everywhere, all over the state. Do not hold your phone while you drive. There's so many alternatives these days. Most cars are equipped with Bluetooth technology to where you don't have to play on your phone while you're driving anyway. But if you don't have that, they have all kinds of gadgets that you can click your phone into a little holder that goes into your air conditioner. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. Some people have a headpiece or things like that. I prefer not to do that either, because I think that you're distracted if you've got something in your ear distracting you. But distracted driving is the number one cause for traffic-related incidences. And right now, our ordinance mirrors our state law, which is very, very weak. Our state law is restricted to only texting. And to be honest, our law enforcement officers, they can't enforce that. I mean, you would literally have to pull somebody over if you saw them playing on their phone. They could be talking on it, on speakerphone or doing something else. So you'd literally have to subpoena their phone records to see if they were texting while that stop occurred, and that's just too difficult. We are preempted by state law. We can't really do anything at this point, which stinks. I was hoping that we could have some more restrictive ways, but state law prohibits that. Right now in our state, a bus driver can talk on the phone, hold the phone in their hand, talk on speakerphone, and drive our kids around. And that, to me, is very, very scary. And we've got to change that. I think that if we send a resolution up to Columbia, it's already gone through our legislator a few times. It hasn't passed, hasn't made it all the way through. But it has been on the floor a few times, and it's been discussed these last couple of sessions. And if some of our bigger municipalities around the state got behind it, it could pass. I don't think our local legislators really know where we stand right now, because we're just kind of going with the status quo. So I would love to see our legal department draft a resolution that we could vote on through public safety and bring to council, and say that we support going completely hands-free in this city and giving our officers an opportunity to enforce the law. And if it just stops one less traffic death, and that's all that matters to me. So many accidents has happened because people are distracted, and our phone, unfortunately, has become our biggest distraction. And really, in terms of everything, just look socially how less conversations we have with people face to face. People would rather do it over a text message or a phone. And unfortunately, there's no reason why you should be distracted by your phone while you're driving. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Shade.
So I welcome the invitation, Councilmember Griffin, to bring it up in front of public safety, and with a caveat, maybe we can review our current ordinance on texting and see what we need to do to beef that up as well. So we'll bring that up at our next public safety meeting.
I concur. It's an excellent idea. I'm afraid of the preemption that the state legislature has on us, but I certainly support any effort that we can do to toughen it up.
I failed to mention that too, Mr. Mayor, that I looked at our ordinance, citywide, our city ordinance, which mirrors our state law. The fine is $100. That's very, very low. And it has no effect on your driving record currently. That to me is really, really, really weak legislation, and I don't know if we can do anything to tighten our laws locally, maybe increase the fine, but hopefully y'all can have that discussion with legal staff and your committee and bring that to council. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Waring.
As far as what can we do, I I commend Councilman Griffin. He's probably saving me from myself. I'm guilty of that. So I don't need to do it. I don't text, but I do talk. So can we pass something like this, councils, or we can't?
Steve, I don't know if you want to come up and speak to council about this. Steve and Mallory have both looked at this issue, and I think, unfortunately, we are totally preempted at this point, but I'll let Steve.
Well, let me ask one other question before you respond, Steve. So we can vote to prohibit plastic bags when the state doesn't have that in place, but we can't vote to stop talking on the phone?
Yeah, we had actually our ordinance in place before the state ordinance passed, and when the state ordinance passed, they expressly preempted us from regulating texting and driving, so it basically made our ordinance obsolete. I will say that there is a hands-free act. It's Senate Bill 723 that's currently pending that basically would say you cannot have a device in your hand anytime you're operating a motor vehicle, with the exception if you're stopped or parked or making an emergency phone call. So, but I think if we want to go with something like that, we have to go out on the state level and not here on the local level.
Which is why I'm asking for a resolution.
Right, we could certainly support that bill. All right, so any other discussion? If not, we will send forward with recommendations and research to the Public Safety Committee. All right? So next, we're ready for our regular committee reports. First up is Committee on Public Works, Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Griffin was very able-bodied and sitting in for me until I could arrive.
You arrived very quickly.
He did a good job. The acceptance and dedication of rights-of-way, A1, 2, and 3, or AI, yeah, A1, 2, and 3, passed unanimously, and I move that they...
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Items, well, I should have voted. Under stormwater management update, under I, Cooper Jackson Drainage Evaluation Project to award the dollars of a contract of $432,136 to AECom, passed unanimous, and I move accordingly. What? Yeah. Well, let me include I 1, 2, 1 and 2 at least.
Second. Okay. Any discussion on those?
One question I would
Councilmember Mitchell.
Number I on Cooper Jackson Street. Would that take in, what area that would take in on Jackson Street? Would it take in Jackson and Aiken, the area around in that particular area?
So those are the names for the basins that were used in the 1984 study for clarity.
Yeah.
It basically extends approximately from Reed Street on the south up to about Highway 17 on the north, then from East Bay and Morrison on the east to just past King Street on the west. So it's not exactly a square, but it's that general shape. It's about 200 acres. That's all contained within that study area.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And number 3, discussion of small project budget allocation. I'd like to bring some clarification to that during public citizen participation. There was a comment about being skewed to districts one or another. That was provided as information only.
That's
so
correct.
All council members are going to have input on the small projects that will come forward. So that was not a defining list, and the process works.
Right.
As soon as Councilman Griffin thought, wait a minute, District 10 isn't being properly represented, he spoke up, and that's part of the process. So sometimes we are privileged serving on the Public Works Committee, but all 13 of us, including the mayor, have access to the same information, and Mr. Fountain will be getting in contact with you, sharing that list and asking for a small project in all 12 council districts, and somehow we're going to find a way to prioritize that. So I thought that needed to be clarified, because sometimes we have to take pot shots, Councilman Appel. We asked for this, so we have to listen, give the public a chance to speak, but then we get a chance to write the record. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So that information, if it had not gone out to you all, will be going out to you all, asking for small drainage projects in your area. And unless there are any questions on that, I'd like to turn over to Mr. Fountain for the stormwater project updates, and listen out for projects in your district.
Could I just recognize Councilmember Jackson? I think she had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Waring, Chairman Waring. I had the privilege of sitting in and listening to your discussion, and then I talked to Mr. Fountain afterwards, and I really think that the list that he had passed out to you was meant to be more of a sample of projects that had been put into his department over the last year or two as things that are in scope starting out to be small anyway. But I think it's more important for us as a body to help the stormwater department figure out how to prioritize. First of all, how to define small projects that could lead to big projects. And then secondly, how to prioritize. So I'm very encouraged to know that the department is close within the next several months of having a more objective prioritization way of looking at our needs, because we're never going to have enough money to spend on everything that, we know in good conscience is required of us to do the best we can with our drainage systems. So I really appreciated having the conversation, but I do think it sort of got off base in terms of making that this was the list that was going to be going forward to us for any sort of approval. So I look forward to the prioritization.
And that was a good point you raised, Councilman Griffin.
Councilmember Griffin.
I don't think that my frustrations were that I thought that this was going to be the list, because let's be honest, I'm not going to stand for it. And I think that I can get 7 votes that stand with me, that they wouldn't allow us to pass a list where 11 out of the 12 districts have a project and 1 has 0. All I'm trying to figure out is why was there an omission there? I mean, to say, well, I think this was just an idea of what we could have gone with. I mean, if we're going to put the council districts listed on there, hey, this project's in this district, this project's in that. I mean, did somebody think that I wasn't going to figure it out, that my district wasn't the only one that was missing? I mean, I would like an explanation on that. Was it that the list was put together at the last second and we just kind of rushed to get some projects out there? Because to say that, hey, these are the projects that people have been fighting for a while, trust me, there's plenty of projects that I've been fighting for since I got on council. And I'm just very, very frustrated by this process, because had I not spoken up, and for some reason we had said, you know what, let's move forward with this, I would have looked like somebody who didn't care about my district. Because every single other district is able to take a project back to their people and say, you know what, we got this project coming this fiscal year, except for me.
Mr. Mayor, if you would allow.
Councilmember Waring.
I really do think, remember, there were some projects on there that I would like to have been on there too. Now, I really want to take the high road on this, because for council to get to a point of prioritizing many projects in all the districts, believe me, it's going to take some give and take. And as I said, any omission, thank God you weren't muffled. You weren't muffled in the committee, and you're not muffled today. So you're standing up for your district, and I applaud you for that, just as any one of us would do. That was just I think a simple error. All right, okay, thank you.
Let's proceed with the, Mr. Fountain, your remarks on the project updates.
Well, Mayor, can we do something first? I think Councilmember Mitchell, we were about to vote. Councilmember Mitchell wanted to ask a question, so we really need to finish the vote on 1 and 2. Well, no, you did ask him the question, but you need to finish the vote on 1 and 2.
1, 2, and 3.
Jumped down.
We did have a motion on the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we already voted on 1 and 2. I'm sorry.
We didn't take a vote. Any other comments on 1, 2, and 3? Because there were 2 items from...
At 1 and 2. It's
1
just
and
1 and 2.
Okay, 1 and 2, which are passed Ways and Means already.
And I've got the people who made the motions. We just need to vote.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Fountain.
So just briefly to walk through the updates on the projects from this month. Spring Fishburne Phase 4, the concrete lining pours are completed at this point, so there's no more concrete pouring on the project. There is still grouting work and some repair work in the actual deep tunnel, and they'll be able to come out of the tunnel and on surface work for Phase 3, and that will be the end of major subsurface work in that tunnel section. So that's still on track for completion this summer for all portions of Phase 3. Phase 4, we're at the point where we've installed just under half of the pipe piles for the wet well, which is basically the foundation support that then we'll begin excavation and be able to build that wet well in. The cofferdam is also continuing installation. That's what you normally see as you drive by that project site and you see the big sheet piles sitting down into the project site. Those are the cofferdam piles being installed. That's proceeding well as well. For Lake Dotterer, we do have our draft report from Weston Sampson on that. We do show improvements to both Church Creek and Lake Dotterer water levels from installing additional pipes under Glen McConnell. We've coordinated with the county on that. They've asked us to produce the engineering plans and apply for the necessary DOT permits for incorporating that into their widening project. So we'll have an amendment coming for council with that activity to be able to actually go forward with actual construction plans for installing those pipes under Glen McConnell. Let's see, the Church Creek storage project evaluations. Those show varying benefit depending on the exact size and location. We're finalizing the reports on those, but we do see some significant benefit in what we call kind of the mid-basin storage project, which is where we take the canal running from Bees Ferry Road to the CSX Railroad and look for additional storage options. It's kind of at the bottom of the basin. It's where the water naturally occurs. Looks like there's some very good opportunities to see some real improvements across the basin from storing water in that location. The traffic circle is the other section, the West Ashley Circle is the other section that we looked at storage. That has a lower kind of cost-benefit ratio. There's not quite as much benefit to the overall basin from that location because it's sort of shifted over to the side of the basin. There is some benefit in the modeling to neighborhoods kind of in the vicinity of that circle. So that's one we're still looking at as another project as well. We did also evaluate what we normally call the Whitfield Canal, which is sort of the canal that runs behind the Walmart down through the Whitfield property, parallel to the CSX Railroad across Glen McConnell, and then into the canal. We've been coordinating with CWS on acquiring a shared easement through that area. The CWS is basically using it to install a major new water line, and we would be using it to be able to maintain the drainage system that's back there. And that's actually moving forward pretty well. We've had some good coordination meetings with CWS on that. So they're good opportunity for us both to leverage two projects that we're doing together. We did show in the modeling, though, that one of the options we looked at was doing kind of significant improvements to conveyance in that canal. At that point, we can't recommend that approach because it actually brings the water too quickly to the railroad track where there's an impoundment and actually worsens flooding in that portion of the basin. So we'll have to look at doing some kind of like linear storage facility if we want to keep going with that approach in the project, but I think there still are some options because there's a significant amount of space there. Low battery project is continuing. Piles should be complete this month. Those are all drilled piles. At that point, we'll be able to go in and basically backfill void spacing with a polyurethane injection grout, reconstruct the decking, and then be able to move up. If you go there now, you actually can see we're starting to cut some of the old concrete vertical wall sections out to start that next stage of the project. So that one's continuing very well as well. We've talked about it before that we do have the change order coming for that project. That change order has been finalized at a staff level. We'll have that coming to council, I believe, in next council meeting. It's kind of, again, it's the pile design for the project. It was the major unknown for the entire project between the void spacing and the pile design. It's about just over $300,000. We expect to be a little bit of savings on the void spacing, so we're still well within our project contingency and our plans for the project. We shouldn't have a delay of more than a couple weeks on the project. So again, moving forward well at this point. That should take us through most of the potential unknowns on reconstructing a 120-year-old wall through the city. Let's see, Lord Calvert, we approved that change order this evening. That should be completed this month. That's the roadside drainage improvement on Lord Calvert. The Rivers Point Row project that was completed at a recent council meeting, that was kind of a separated section of pipes in Rivers Point Row. That project has been completed. We're just now reviewing pipe video to close out that project work. King Uji, the street level improvements the design is 95% complete and it's in review by DOT for encroachment permit at this point. We do have a conceptual improvement plan at about 30% for the next stages, which are then improving the outfalls and looking at pumping options. So that's moving forward as well. The Central Park drainage evaluation, we're continuing to go through our improvement options in the model. That should be ready, still on track for this spring, for early this spring. And then we'll be able to develop projects and moving out of that. The east side, which we're now trying to determine the Cooper-Jackson drainage evaluation to try to clarify which section we're talking about. Obviously, we approved that this evening, so we'll be able to move into survey work on that project. We're also coordinating with CWS on that project as well, as they've done quite a bit of recent work in the area, so they're giving us some of their survey work and information work to help us keep our costs down on that as well. Keeping a good relationship there. Barbary Woods, the RFQ is currently in the public realm for response for professional firms. We had a pre-application conference. We had about 18 people come to the conference. There's a lot of interest in that project. That should close this month, and we'll be going to an evaluation process to make a recommendation for a firm to award that work to. The Windermere drainage improvement, that RFQ preparation is complete. We should be advertising it this month as that Barbary RFQ starts to wind down. The Earhart Tunnel extension, the design's continuing on that project. The Forest Acres project, we are still waiting for the utilities to finalize their plans so we can finalize our construction drawings and permits, but we are at a point where we're just about done with all the actual design and permitting work. We just need to get that utility relocation finalized. Danoon Drive, that bid closed. We do have an apparent low bidder, and that's coming to council next meeting for award of that construction contract. And then if I just roll into the floodplain management updates, the HMGP buyout should be coming to council next session for the most recent of those buyout grants. And then we also just received notice that we're approved for the most recent FMA grant that we have applied for buyouts as well. So that was a lot. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on Lake Daughter, everything's done. Long Branch is okay. Where it drains into Long Branch, everything's okay there. And now everything should be coming to council now, is that what I heard?
So for Lake Daughter, the models show improvement in Church Creek and Lake Daughter both, with very minor impacts to Long Branch as we move south. We will have to make some minor improvements to reduce those impacts to Long Branch. So that'll be part of basically be a task now coming, is in the original work authorization for Weston Sampson is to do the modeling to figure out does it work. So at this point we said it does work, and we can actually go in and do the construction design. And the county's asked us to do that and incorporate it into their design rather than sort of them doing it, we paying for their work. I think they think that's a cleaner approach, which is fine with us. So we'll be bringing back to council the amendment for the professional services to do the actual construction design so DOT can permit that improvement, and we can then, we'll have two tasks likely. A second task will be the improvements to Long Branch moving downstream.
Okay, great. And you think that can be brought next council meeting?
That one will be 2 council meetings, I believe, for that one.
Okay.
Because it typically has to go kind of through a process first and then come to council.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a question, Mr. Fountain.
Yes, sir.
Going back to the Forest Acres drainage project, I think it was in 2014 that myself, Mayor Rowley, met with the powers that be with AT&T about moving that utility trunk line. And the better part of 6 years later, they had 2 choices: put it deeper, or again, we put a bigger box over it. And as I understand it, they're still debating on which one they want to do.
They are. The discussions on the project staff level at least started January 2013. It may have been that there were follow-up meetings in 2014, but they are still looking at which option to move forward with.
And you see, I think what we ought to do is, if there's a way for us to tabulate what has been our cost increase while they delayed their decision, we need to know that, because what that's going to do, if they continue to delay, it's going to raise the cost of that project, which is going to take monies that can go to other projects. Why? Because AT&T has chosen to hold on to their money for the better part of 6 years, as opposed to making a capital expense. We have to have coordination between utilities. We can't allow them to do that for 6 years. Now, I think the phase 1 was supposed to cost around $8 million or so, $8.5 million. I think it ended up costing about 11. Now, all of that was not AT&T's fault. Some of it was. So to allow that to happen for the second phase, we just have to bring more attention to that, bring them in the room, put the spotlight on it, because in everybody's district, and particularly older districts, you're going to run into the need to coordinate with other utilities. And this is the first time that I've seen where coordination with a utility moving some of their product if you will, out of the way has taken the better part of 6 years. So that has to have an inflationary cost to us. And for them to not have that passed on to them because they delayed in making their decision, we just can't allow that to happen. So stay tuned. We're going to have to wrap this one up a little bit more. I know you're on that page, Mr. Mayor, so I thought that needs to be put on the record. So when it's revisited again, they'd be placed on notice. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So that wraps up his report. You also had an executive session and another discussion that we're going to take up later in this meeting.
That's right.
Do you want to make any report on the executive session?
Executive session, we just got advice from legal staff and no action was taken. It's for information only. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you. So next we'll have our report from Councilmember Shealy, Committee on Special Facilities.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we had the...
Mayor, I made an error. I have to go back. Excuse me, Councilman. We did vote on 2 evaluation projects that was on that list.
That's correct.
It was the Dowden area drainage evaluation and the West Pawnee evaluation drainage project, not to do the project, but just to do a study.
Right.
To see what the fixes may be. Those are projects that were being placed in front of us going back probably 5 years, Councilman Shahid. So I think that was their 3rd time back in front of us. So the committee voted to go ahead and spend the money to have, so those evaluations can be completed.
So staff will move forward, but I'm sure those matters will come back to Ways and Means.
But I think we would need a motion on that. It's about $125,000.
That's the estimate. This would really be number 3, Little Roman numeral 3. It was 2 of the items that were on the small project budget allocation.
Correct.
Right.
I apologize for my omission on that.
So we have a motion to approve. Any discussion on those 2? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. So next, we'll have our Committee on Special Facilities, Councilmember Shealy.
All right, thank you, Mayor Tecklenburg. The South Carolina Aquarium came and gave us a report on what they're doing with the Maritime Center, or what their plans are. Ms. Lewandowski came to us and first of all just said that they've got these structured school programs right now. They're serving about 7,000 students. With what they want to do, they should be able to double the number of kids that they have in this. They've got some teen programs that they're wanting to do. They're going to have a teen science cafe, teen conservation group, and they're going to be hosting summer programs, some STEM education programs, natural science, and they're going to have this outdoor classroom that opens up onto the waterfront there, and they'll have DNR and NOAA and some other field projects that'll be right there on the waterfront. So it was some interesting things that they had going on. They're also training teachers now, and they feel like that with this new facility, they'll be able to train even more teachers. And they're bringing in these kids from all over the state of South Carolina, so as far as Greenville, bringing them in, but they're also broadcasting, they will be broadcasting classes as well, so that people that can't make it down here will be able to see. Now, some of you may know that NASA will be using the building that's just a little bit north of the aquarium. They're going to be working together with NASA on some resiliency, sea level rise things. They're also looking at putting a cafe on that property as well. They're going to have a kitchen for catering on there. On the addition they're going to put an addition on the south side of that Maritime Center. It'll be about 3,000 square feet, and it'll have restrooms there. They'll be ADA compliant, and our transit boaters that are parked there will also be able to use those. They'll have showers there as well. So, and of course, the second floor, we'll still have city offices there, and the International African American Museum will also be able to use that second floor there. So they're, with their timeline, they're hoping to open May 2022, so right along the same time as the International African American Museum. So that's my report.
Terrific. Councilmember Shade.
Just want to thank Councilman Shealy for running that meeting this afternoon. And one of the parts of all that came out, we're not excluding the access to that property for other events that can be taking place. I think that's really important, and it's going to be a multi-use facility, and I think finally we'll be getting our bang out of that buck for that property. So I'm glad we're on that track. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just got a quick question about this aquarium matter in the Maritime Center. We got a wonderful tour of the aquarium, gosh, probably a month ago now, and it goes without saying how fantastic of a facility and asset that is to our community. They indicated that there had been a lease or an MOU that they had provided the city a while back. Is there any update or status on where that stands in terms of what we're working on?
We didn't, it was on the timeline of where we go from here. They made the presentation, and maybe Sterling is going to step forward and give us an update on the lease itself.
I'm not sure if I have an update on the lease. We did sign an MOU between the aquarium and the IAM and the city, and that was a while back. But the lease is under review currently, so I know we have a couple of departments working on that.
So probably in a month or 6 weeks or a couple of months, we'll bring a definitive lease proposal back. It'll probably go maybe to special facilities, but I'll have to go to real estate committee as well and come back to us. I think the MOU anticipated maybe a 3-way lease, and that got a little complicated. So we've kind of gone back and are going to bring forward one lease for the aquarium and then another lease for a different part of the property with the IM. Councilmember Saccharin. Oh, okay, good. All right. Any further questions on that? All right, next we'll move on to Committee on Traffic and Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Traffic and Transportation Committee met this afternoon about 3:45. We had an exciting day. We began with what I described as a quasi-judicial proceeding. It was an appeal from the denial of a parking decal in Councilmember Mitchell's district. The appellant was given 5 minutes to present her case. Ms. Borden presented the case for the city. I would note that this was a appeal from the denial of permits inside a parking district, and the question was, would we go from 2 to 4? Both sides presented their case. The jury, aka the committee, deliberated for the requisite amount of time, and the verdict of the jury / committee was 5-0 to deny the permit. It was not a heartless act. The request really would have set a precedent where we would have doubled the number of parking decals on the peninsula of Charleston in our A through I parking districts. Whether you do it on your hand, which I did today, is 9 parking districts without adding a single parking space. It was just an impossible situation. I do applaud the appellant for coming and pleading their case, but I do believe that the verdict was appropriate. This does not, by the way, require approval of council. The Traffic and Transportation Committee is the final say on that, but I wanted to let you know we have not had one of these for a while, so quasi-judicial proceeding completed successfully, and I don't believe that the appellant left dissatisfied. They got their moment in court, and I think understood the decision that we made because we did explain it. We did have then 2 requests for traffic calming speed humps in the east side neighborhood on Aiken Street, on the north central neighborhood from Magnolia Avenue. Mr. Somerville presented and said each one of those met all of the prerequisites under our ordinance, and so I would move that those be approved by this council.
Further discussion? All in favor of the speed humps, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And finally, Mr. Benjamin, as always, gave us his excellent update from his seat, and there's a number of things going on in his department, not the least of which is staffing, which was approved from last year's budget. I believe we've actually advertised for the multimodal position, and we will be adding a member of the Traffic and Transportation team soon, which will be looking at multimodalism, among other things. So lots happening in the world of traffic and transportation. I invite anyone from this council to come and visit us at Traffic and Transportation, which a number of council members did today, and who knows what's going to happen next. So with that, that is my report. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council. Okay, next will be our Committee on Ways. Yep. Oh, Councilmember Mitchell? Yeah.
Just for information.
The speed hump thing?
Oh, I keep forgetting those don't require approval. Thank you very much. I'll remember that after 11 years on that committee and in year 12. Yeah, I said never. It's never going to happen.
Approved them anyway.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We like traffic calming measures. All right. So next, Committee on Ways and Means, Councilmember Gregory.
Mr. Mayor?
Was there a motion?
There was a motion to first approve it. I would just like to amend it that we approve it consistent with the changes and recommendations that were approved in the committee meeting.
All right. Any discussion, Councilmember Waring?
Mr. Mayor, I may be out of order on this, but on the $220 million for CPW, I started to bring this up in our Public Works Committee meeting. I really believe we need to look at the debt structure for the city of Charleston, given the gravity of what's happening in the stock market, and particularly the bond market. Interest rates came down the lowest they've been since the federal government's been issuing Treasury bills. When I came in here today, the 10-year Treasury bill was at 0.78%. Okay? This week, it actually got down below 0.40%. The 30-year government bond, when I came in this room, it closed today at 1.121%. So the opportunity that we have a chance to refinance some of our debt at a low rate will create additional cash flow, potentially where we can go out and issue more bonds to do some of these drainage projects for right now that we don't have the money for.
Absolutely.
Now, as I understand it, the city does not have a financial advisor. Our bond attorney cannot be the financial advisor. It would be a conflict of interest. So maybe in the next council meeting, we can have that on the agenda, or we'll have some discussions in the interim between that time and now. Look at our tranches of bonds when they come up for maturity, and hopefully begin to develop a strategy for if these rates were to stay down. And I don't see interest rates going up drastically over the next couple of years as some of our bonds roll towards maturity or roll towards being callable. So if we can do that, I think we can begin to do some of the same financial strategies that CPW is employing.
Sure. So thanks for bringing that up. When minds are thinking alike here, when he announced, and he told me before the meeting, that they were saving nearly $20 million on this refinance. Certainly that thought occurred to me. And we have, over the last 4 years, refinanced a few older bond issuances and saved similar, saved in a similar fashion. So we have the ability in-house, I know Matt's listening over here, to look at what we have outstanding and just knowing the numbers, being able to recommend to our bond council items that we might look to refinance and save some money.
So let's move to that, make a move in that area while these rates are.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes all the sense in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So did we end up with a motion on the floor?
We haven't voted.
For Ways and Means approval?
No.
Councilmember Saccharin?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Waring has said many things over the past 2 months that I agree with. This is the one that I agree with the most.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if my district has an inordinate amount of economists, but I've received 3 emails the past 2 weeks specifically addressing what Mr. Waring said from my constituents. So if we can do it, let's get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look at that.
We got the motion.
We got a motion on the floor, save the one item that's held out for the executive session. All right, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, the ayes have it. Now we have one bill up for third reading with a motion to renew requested by Councilmember Saccharin, who is on the prevailing side. So we will entertain this motion to renew. It's not voting on the issue itself, but just enabling council to then take up the matter of basically a revote on this bill for third reading.
I'll move for approval.
So we have the motion to renew.
Yes.
And a second. Any discussion on the motion to renew? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, the ayes have it. So now, with one nay, now we can entertain a motion for third reading and ratification
to increase the freeboard to 2 feet for new residential and non-residential construction. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion?
Wait a minute.
Could you repeat?
We're on item L?
We're on L1.
L1, right.
L1.
Wait a
We've
minute.
now basically put the item on the agenda. This is for new residential and non-residential construction to increase the freeboard to 2 feet. Any discussion?
I second it.
All in favor? Oh, Councilmember Shealy.
I know this was brought up last time. I just want to clarify, if I could get Mr. Julka, I just want to make sure, passing this could possibly, it is possible we could get that CRS rating by doing this, by passing this version right here, that it is possible. I think you said that last meeting, but I just want to confirm.
Sure. It is possible. No guarantees. Again, the way that the CRS points are allocated for this particular element are that there are a number of points assigned to each additional foot of freeboard that a community has on their books. So we have an opportunity to make our case to the CRS reviewer for partial points that kind of fall in between the number of points for 1 foot and the number of points for 2 feet, but no guarantees that they'll agree with the case that we make. That being said, this is the freeboard is one piece of our overall effort to improve our rating. I certainly think that it is possible to do a lot of work citywide in other areas in order to improve our rating. This is just one of the larger point items, and so getting points from the freeboard ordinance would make it a lot easier to get to that next level, but there are certainly a lot of other things that we are working on to help improve our rating.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Jalka. Thank you, Councilmember Shealy. I think the word possible, there's a lot of unknown in that word, and so I really don't think we should vote on this comforting ourselves that if we pass this, that we have an excellent chance of adding those points to our rating score, because it's not done. I mean, we would be doing something that is out of the normal. And I'm not very confident that an agency like FEMA is going to bend over backwards to do something as creative and innovative of setting a precedent that they can shave points when they make it clear that if we had the freeboard for all purposes, new and rehab construction, then we would be eligible for the points without question. So that's the basis of my vote for this, and then when we get to the next question.
Right. Any further discussion? Councilmember Seeking.
Thank you, Mayor Techmark. I just want to very briefly explain my vote, which is going to be no on this, and I'm going to tell you why. It has nothing to do with the hard work that Mr. Julka has done, which Mr. Fountain is doing. One of the things that is not taken into consideration in this is that you can reach freeboard +2 in new construction by any means possible. You can do it any way you want. And to me, what's missing through this process and through this ordinance and through the things we're doing, and I think is somewhat inconsistent with some of the policy that we've made in the city by adopting the Dutch dialogues, is you can go to freeboard +2 by using fill. So you got 1, 2, it's still fill, and a new construction, if it's slab on grade, it again creates an inconsistency. So I believe that we need, and in our new stormwater regulations, and Mr. Fountain was kind enough to call me about this last week, we don't have a ban on that. It's not part of our, not have a ban on fill and build. It's not in there, a ban. So I think we need to think about this. Again, I really do applaud Mr. Julka. He's worked really hard on this, and I don't want my no vote to make him think he hasn't done his job. I just think collectively we need to look at this as a matter of policy going forward. If we're going to demand and command that you meet these standards of freeboard +2, I think we also need to look at the other policies in the city and make sure we don't meet it in a way that's inconsistent with the recommendations that, among others, the Dutch has given us, which is to fill and build. So with that said, we still have a lot of work to do. This is one small piece of a bigger puzzle. Thank you.
before I come back to you. Anybody else?
I just have a
Councilmember
question
Waring?
that Councilmember Seeking, because it's kind of a question that Councilman Griffin came up with a couple weeks ago. Would you recommend pulling Phil and Bill out and let's look at that separately?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you're asking me, but I do think we need to start looking at that, especially if we pass this. And I sense this is going to pass, which is not going to ruin my night with a no vote, but I just want to make sure. I do think we need to talk about it. I think we need to get on that quickly before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So I think under the rules, I'm allowed to explain my vote, and I'm just explaining it and without any hard feelings.
Right.
Go forward.
Yeah, I respect that. I would point out that the new stormwater manual requirements that we just recently passed do apply. And, even though they don't ban the use of fill, it does control what kind of fill can be used and the permeability thereof, and you still got to meet all the requirements for your site. And so, there are some occasions, be it building a foundation or a road, where reasonably some fill is needed, just in the construction. If all the stormwater requirements are met, it's just not an unreasonable thing to have some element of fill where that situation occurs. So that's my perspective.
I get it, I understand, and I appreciate
I would respectfully say we get the freeboard done. If we need to go back and revisit the stormwater manual again, I'm fine with that. Councilmember Jackson.
Well, that would be my vote too, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Councilmember Seeking's motivation for voting no on this, but I feel like it would be sort of cutting off our nose to spite our face if in the interim of not coming back with a more holistic preventing fill for the freeboard requirements, or however we're going to be adjusting it in good conscience to continue to protect the city and make our development as protective as possible. But what if in the interim we get our audit and then we have nothing on the book? So I feel like this is at least half a loaf, especially as we go on to the first reading. And then we do need to, in good conscience, understand the ramifications that we're doing here that won't be met as thoroughly as the stormwater manual is prepared to do. And if we still have the incentive to prevent fill when a house is built under the freeboard regulations, then I think that's our next step as a conscientious council.
Any further comments? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the ayes have it. We have-
Okay.
Can I just see a show of hands of the nays?
Show for the nays.
I can't remember. Is Councilmember Gregory allowed to vote on this?
Who?
Councilmember Gregory wasn't here.
He was absent at the last meeting, but
But he can vote.
he is allowed to vote. Yes. Can I again ask for a show of hands on the nays, just for the record?
All right, this is the nays.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3.
All right, thank you. Sure. Susan, would you like to?
Yeah, the motion to renew brings up the matter again, and so anybody who's here can vote on that matter.
Right.
What was the other motion?
Reconsider, which would have had to have been done
At the
the other
meeting.
evening at council.
Right.
Motion to renew is done at the subsequent meeting.
All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. Next.
I just wanted to thank certainly staff and the hearty debate we had. I know Council Leader Jackson and I have a respectful difference on this, and we've definitely debated this one.
Yeah.
But our legal staff did a wonderful job on this.
Great.
You did a good job on this, and I just want to thank.
Thank you.
It wasn't easy. We've been discussing this one probably the better part of a year, and I want to specifically thank Councilman Saccharin for bringing it and putting it back on the agenda. He said that 2 weeks ago that he wanted to speak to his constituents, get a little bit more information. He did his due diligence and brought it back. And I told him before the meeting, I felt guilty not voting for that deferral, because being new to council on a difficult subject just like this is a difficult subject. So I appreciate him doing his homework and being a man of his word, putting it back on the agenda. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So next up is bills for second
Move
reading.
1 through 5.
We got 1 through 5. And do we have any discussion on any of those? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. And now for third reading and ratification. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So next we have our one bill that's up for first reading, and that's related to the one we just had for third reading. This is to increase the freeboard requirement from 1 to 2 foot it says for new residential and non-residential construction, and from 1 to 2 for substantial improvement of all residential and non-residential structures. So it includes everything. It's almost like an amendment to what we had, but it's first reading, basically of amendment to the freeboard. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Griffin.
Can you read through the explanation on this one a little bit? I'm confused. I mean, this is so much like what we just passed. And why are we voting on something so similar as a first reading when we just voted on a third reading?
Because this includes renovations.
We just passed half of it. This is the whole.
And how did it end up on the agenda? Was this brought forward by you, Mr. Mayor, or by somebody on council?
It was brought forward by the administration, yes, by me. Yep. And so the reason, one of the reasons we did it this way was because when you get to third reading of that other matter, if you want to amend something, then there are different rules of the game. So I just thought it would be clearer to, number one, to differ the discussion, because I think we had pretty good concurrence on the new construction and some more discussion about existing homes. So we separated it so we could separate that issue. Councilmember Rappel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a very complex and important issue. I think it's great that we've adopted half of the loaf of bread tonight. I think that's great. We've made serious progress on that issue. In order to perhaps learn from what we just experienced this first go-round, I would just ask, let's find a way to pull all this information together so we can all, sitting around this table, have a very clear sense of what we're dealing with. So let's look and take up the issue of fill. Let's look and take up the issue of the CRS rating. Let's look and take up the issue that Councilmember Waring is very much on target about. So when we get here in the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now, we can have as informed of a discussion as possible. This is a very complex issue. This is not one where you can just pull up your agenda packet on a Thursday and be ready for this on a Tuesday. We need to have some documentation from the experts internally, explain these various components, put it in a memo, whatever the case may be, so that we can all feel comfortable and confident that we're attacking this issue as intelligently and as deliberatively as possible. It's an important issue, and let's get it right this time.
All right. Councilmember Waring.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councilmember Appel. If we're going to do this, let's have public hearings, and not just in this council chamber. Let's go around from community to community, because people need to know the additional costs. We're talking about a discount potentially on points on flood insurance. The citizens of the city of Charleston need to know the potential costs that 7 votes on this council will cost, in particular existing homeowners, should substantial damage occur to their home for any reason. And right now, I'm a firm believer that in the high 99 percentile, majority of citizens doesn't know the potential cost that would be, that a vote of council, 7 votes on council, would be putting on existing homeowners. But not having that discussion tonight, we need to go around and have public hearings on this. On James Island, West Ashley, Daniel Island, because it affects them too. One of the issues I brought up last night, and well, yesterday evening in the meeting, was this issue has been marginalized by being an issue that affects the poor. That's just not true. One of the examples I brought was probably one of the most successful areas in the city of Charleston is Daniel Island from an engineering standpoint. All the storm events we've had in the last 6 years, didn't have one house to flood over there. That's because they have the most current engineering drainage system in the city of Charleston, and I commend them for it. By the same token, every house over there is at the elevation of FEMA, 13.5 or 14.5. Why should a house on Daniel Island have, if they got substantial damage from a fire, why should they have to undergo jacking the house up 12 more inches, or in some cases 2 feet? And the narrative out there is that it's going to cost about $2,500 to $2,000 to $2,500. That's just not accurate. So that's why we need to have these public hearings out here. It's going to cost, the cost of jacking up a house is substantial. The narrative that was put out there was, well, if you're jacking your house up anyway, why not go up 1 more foot? That's not the narrative with people who have existing houses. In their case, in particular, if they didn't flood, why jack the house up at all? Because sea level may rise 40 years from now. I'm a believer in sea level rise. There are too many people in this area that cannot afford to jack up homes because of our policies, not because of the federal government policy, not because of state government policy, because of policy that the government that's closest to them puts in place. So if we're going to do this, let's not just keep it within the staff and the 13 people that will vote on this. Let's truly roll it out to the public and hear from the public on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm looking at Mr. Lindsay, in your presentation that you gave us earlier this evening, how does this issue fall into our comprehensive plan that you've been starting to work on, and how does this all match?
This specific issue is not something that the comprehensive plan is going to recommend on. You need to solve this issue separately in its own environment. However, we are going to look at areas that currently flood, areas that will flood in the future due to sea level rise, and the reasons that they flood. And then we will look at entitlements needing to be decreased or increased as a result of that. So we will be looking at the issue of flooding. However, the specifics of 1 foot versus 2 foot is not going to be addressed by the comprehensive plan. That's a separate effort.
Right. So just as a follow-up then to the suggestion, the public aspect of this, I think that this is a critical idea to do. We've got the time between now and second and third reading to take the show on the road, and let's get public input on this issue.
Councilmember Griffin. Oh, and Gregory. Griffin first.
I just want to remind everybody that we did have a workshop on this for several hours, and we did bring in people to talk about this issue. So this isn't the first time we've talked about it. Really, honestly, what this reminds me of is that we could end up spending hours and hours and hours, again, talking about what we just voted on. And we're probably going to, I mean, with all those hours that we just put in and we couldn't come up with this, what makes you think that we're going to do that now? I'm going to make a motion that we defer this. I think this needs a little more thought. And seeing as how we've already approved something tonight, I don't see why we should vote on something else on this right now.
I have a motion to defer. Is there a second? Sure. Yes, sir. Councilmember Waring.
We could just vote it up or down tonight. I mean, instead of deferring it, and still have those hearings.
Right.
Well, I mean, we still can have that information. We still can go about getting the information. But anyway, I've had a chance to speak twice on this, but we can vote it up or down on this and be done with it, and still have those public hearings.
Right. Councilmember Gregory.
If what we experienced on the west side, okay, when we brought this issue up, is any indication, okay, of how this is going to play, it's not going to play very well at all. I mean, they were adamantly opposed to this provision. Now, I know you just put it here, but we explained to them what was going on.
And this was where?
This was at our West Side neighborhood meeting.
I see.
And I think we should defer it and have a public hearing on it, because I think if you get a public hearing on it, this room will be full.
All right.
On this, I'm talking about the first reading, N1. I'm not talking about L1, but N1.
Right. Right. We've already passed L1.
So we know.
So is that did you make a second to the motion?
Deferral, yes.
Okay, so we now have a second. All right. Did anyone else want to be recognized on? Councilmember Shealy. All right. Councilmember Saccharin, you had your hand up a minute ago. Brady? Anybody else who hadn't been recognized yet? Councilmember Brady?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think this gives us an opportunity, because one of the reasons I had voted nay on the third reading one was about what Councilmember Seekings had said, not being able to ban fill. And I think this gives us that chance, but also on the substantial improvements to the structure, we can have the discussion around establishing a fund to help people who can't afford to do it and that type of thing. Like, we can have that conversation. And I think that's important to have, because I don't think we should necessarily gut it from the ordinance or vote it down just because of that being in there, because there's no solution. Like, we can come up with a solution to help in that regard. So I'm in favor of moving this version forward as well.
Yes, thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question to Mr. Jolka?
Councilmember Seekings.
So, Mr. Jolka gave us all an excellent presentation. It was excellent, that explains exactly what freeboard is and what it isn't. And I think one of the things we need to all be clear on this table is freeboard does not equal currently existing elevation of a house. There are some places where you're well below freeboard, so freeboard plus 2 could be 7, could be 8 in my district in the very low parts of the old peninsula. So this is complicated. We had a long discussion about this. You remember the last time there was some thought about exempting old historic district. We didn't get to that. There's a lot of moving parts on this. And I think I'd love to hear back from Mr. Jolka to explain it all again. And I have a question for you, and I don't know if this is possible, and I don't want to make work. But is there a way to do a map that shows us in some dimension freeboard and where houses sit relative to freeboard today? And then so we know if you have a substantial improvement to 63 Gibbs Street, what that really means in absolute elevation if we pass this. And I know that's probably a lot of work, right? I'm looking to our team over here too.
And that's our goal, to get there one day.
Yeah, well, I think if we're going to get there, Mr. Mayor, we should do it sooner rather than later. So when we pass an ordinance and dump it on people, let me rephrase that. We pass an ordinance and people are subject to it. They know if they're going through substantial improvements, how many feet they've got to go up, because that then has BAR implications, has zoning implications, has so many implications. And again, I'm now thinking inwardly in terms of District 8, but it goes across the peninsula. So I think caution on this one is still the word. And I do believe that Mr. Jolka's presentation, when did you give that? It's before we had the elections, right? So there's still some, right, it was a while. Really, we need to get that presentation again. I keep it on my desk. It's excellent. I think we should get it into y'all's hands so you see what freeboard means, how it affects certain areas, and then we can go and look at elevation charts, and people will know to a property certain what freeboard plus 2 means if you have substantial improvements. Does it mean 2 feet? Does it mean 4 feet? All the like. So anyway, thank you for allowing me time. Deferral or not, I think that's something we need to do, and we need to get on this. Even if we vote this down tonight, this is something we got to do. And I'm asking Mr. Jolka, I think, for some help.
So I am going to allow Mr. Jolka to respond. Yeah.
Sure. Making a determination of where buildings currently sit and where they sit in relation to the base flood elevation and in that particular location, right? So every flood zone in the city has a different base flood elevation. There's no single base flood elevation citywide. So there are lots of different base flood elevations across the city. And determining where a building is related to that base flood elevation is more difficult in the historic areas of the city because we would have to do an inventory of the lowest floor elevation of every building to know that.
Right.
Now, in newer parts of the city, particularly 70s onward, we would have a pretty good determination of the lowest floor, or an estimate of the lowest floor elevation of those buildings, because that's when our base flood elevations first came into effect in Charleston. So we would know, based on the time that a particular neighborhood was built, probably where it sits, because it would have had to have been built to that base flood elevation.
So, and thank you for that, and I totally get it. And when you say 70s, for my district, that's 1870s,
I understand.
not 1970s, right, or 1770s. So again, I mean, look, at some point, and sooner rather than later, people are going to come in one at a time or two or three at a time and say, you know, we're going to do substantial improvements. It floods in our area. Where do we have to go? And so we're going to have to do that anyway, and eventually we'll have to get there. I know it's super complicated, but in order to vote for this and then go out there, and when people ask any one of us in their district, me in particular, but there's others here that have an old historic district, what does it mean for me if I'm doing substantial improvements? How high do I have to go? And is it even possible with BIR regulations and zoning? We're going to have to go property by property. And
So I'd like to just comment and add to what Mr. Joko shared, and that is, if you're not required to do this unless you're in a special flood protection area, correct? So if you're in one of those special flood protection areas and you have a mortgage on your home, and I know some people own their homes free and clear, then you have to have, most banks require, mortgages require you have flood insurance. So to get a flood insurance, you've got to have an elevation certificate done on your house. And so that's how you know for that specific property what that delta is between your lowest living level and what freeboard plus 2 would mean. Right now, we've got it set at freeboard plus 1. So I do want to share with council, and I've inquired about this. I mean, there's a day that we will get to where we as a city know the base flood elevation of every property in every special flood protection area. Unfortunately, and other cities have tried it as well, when you just do a scan of people's reports, and we collected as many as we can, but those reports have changed over the years, and they don't put the information for what we're looking for in the same place. So it needs to be entered by hand by someone going flood elevation certificate one at a time and building a new database in order to be able to punch a button and say, okay, how many properties in this special flood protection area, you know, are at what level and would be impacted by going from the trap that they're already in. We've acknowledged, we talked about this, of going from freeboard plus 1 to freeboard plus 2. So, I mean, I know you say sooner or later, but the task of getting that done could realistically take us a year or so to accomplish. So that's a big job, and it's something that very few communities have accomplished so far.
Just adding very briefly to that, I think it would be very hard to go house by house and to do an elevation determination. Mr. Lindsay and I were just talking about this actually, that you could we can look at some of the LIDAR data and look at the flood elevations and say sort of how high off of ground would a house likely have to be in order to meet the current requirements, which wouldn't tell you if those houses are already in crawl space and already meet requirement. It would give you a sense for like a neighborhood perspective of, are houses generally going to meet, or are they generally going to be too low? So it's starting to provide more data, even if it's not all the data.
It's moot whether.
Yeah. So we have a motion on the floor to defer, and so could I just make a suggestion? I'm hearing all this, unless I'd like to hear from my new council members, particularly if they'd like the opportunity for a new presentation of the information that Councilmember Seekings referred to, that Mr. Jolka has done before. They weren't on board on the council when when we took this matter up, even though we had very long conversations about it. And I'd like to hear from y'all. So they haven't been heard yet. Councilmember Del Chapo. I will come back to Griffin and Jackson.
On and off again. So that meeting that Mr. Jolka did was well after all of us had announced our candidacy. And I sat here, it was open to the public, and we all had that opportunity to be here. I think for him to have to put together something again for new council members, which I'm beginning to resent words being put in my mouth that I don't know information because I'm new, which is completely false. When I decided to run, I had a 50-50% chance of sitting in the seat. So dang right, I started to do my homework and I started to come to council meetings and I came to that presentation and others. Do I know this inside and out? I don't. But I do understand what I'm being asked to vote on, and I do understand my constituents' concerns. And so I don't feel as though we need to have yet another presentation and even more hours upon hours of dialogue. I agree with Councilman Griffin on that. We've had it.
I just had a question for Mr. Jolka. Do you have any idea what these new Charleston FEMA maps are going to be about?
The simple answer is no. The longer answer is it should happen this year.
Because Berkeley County's already gotten there.
That's right.
And that would be a big help to us.
That's right. So that is certainly a really important consideration that's part of this whole conversation because almost all of Charleston County is seeing base flood elevations decrease on the new maps. And an important concern there is that with base flood elevations decreasing in this iteration of the maps, when the next iteration of the maps come around 10, 12 years from now, if all of those base flood elevations go back up, where does that leave people who have built based on the lower base flood elevations in the meantime? So
I heard also that there's a chance that a lot of people that are actually in a special hazard zone now might not be in with these new maps.
That's right.
So that's going to change the game as well.
That's right.
And our ordinance only applies to people who are in the special flood area. So if they're removed, then the requirement would be removed.
Nice to see it.
Yeah, that's right. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly willing to think that we need to bring ourselves back up to speed to where we were when this was first voted on and given first reading and then second reading. I do feel like we had a ton of information provided to us, and the one missing element that I think now, especially your new concerns, Councilmember Waring, about people that are not just low income who own their homes and don't have insurance, but talking about people that are, that are insured and going to have a disaster, God forbid, that would take their house out and make them have to rebuild and replace their house. That's a whole different construct. So we had a lot of expertise from the insurance industry speak to us, and also the construction industry, and we sort of discounted that sort of, one debate at a time. And I do think that it would be very helpful for all of us to have a baseline of facts that we could then say, we're making our minds up because we know this and we believe this, and subsequently we're gonna make a good decision based on these facts. Frankly, my understanding of the insurance industry today, yes, if you have a mortgage and you're in a flood zone, you have to have flood insurance. And even if you don't have a mortgage, which is the case of many of us, if you're in a flood zone, you have to have flood insurance because you won't get homeowners insurance if you don't have flood insurance. And that's just the fact of the insurance requirements today. That is the truth from my own home. I live 12 feet off the ground, I don't have a mortgage, and my homeowners won't write us for regular wind, hail, and disasters, not including flood, unless we have a flood insurance policy in place. I pay very little for it, thank heaven, because it's never going to be put into action, but we have to have that. And even if you're not in a place where you have to have flood insurance and you have a home loss and we require you to build it up, your replacement coverage for your homeowners is going to cover the cost of putting your house to building code, which is what we will be requiring. Freeboard is a building code. And so I really feel like we need to have sort of those baseline of factual information, and then we can say we don't believe them. But please, let's have some experts give us that kind of decision-making criteria, because I really feel like now we're going on a lot of memory that we've accumulated over the last year discussing this, and we're not really thinking clearly about the facts that we have. So I would like to give it first reading tonight so we can start that ball again. I don't want FEMA to come and investigate us or audit us or whatever, visit us to give us our new rating and have this left undone.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to correct, she took me out of context. The newspaper's already taken me out of context, saying that my argument is based in the poor. My argument has always been a broad argument. It's not a new argument. I had that same argument for the better part of a year. So it's much more than low-income people.
I stand corrected on that,
Thank you.
Councilmember Waring, but I do
Councilmember
think we need to take the insurance industry into consideration for what people, let's have some case studies. Let's make a what-if example of this homeowner versus this homeowner.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Sackman.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be short and sweet. Last time I was the guy that wanted to deferral, and I'm going to make that motion again or second that motion that Harry made. And I think it's not because I need additional information, but I was elected by a diverse group of constituents, and I want to make sure that they're aware of this. My first indication 2 nights ago, or a couple nights ago at the West Side, was that they were not aware of it. And it's not that they're just not aware, but I think if we explain it, I think we'll probably get more support. So I'm doing that mainly because I want to get back to my constituents and explain the process to them, and I think it's very important to do.
We got a motion on the floor to defer. Any conversation about the motion to defer at this point?
On the motion to defer, let's go back full circle what started this discussion. I'm sorry, were you ahead of me? No, go ahead.
No, I called on Councilmember Shade. Yeah.
He had his hand up.
Don't worry about it, go ahead.
So
I'll recognize you. Yeah.
He's the senior to me. Anyhow, let's come back to full circle what started this conversation with what Councilmember Appel said and what Councilmember Waring said. Not that we need to be but taking it to the public and educating the public on this. So if we give this first reading tonight, we'll take this to the public. Let's have these public hearings on this. Let's let the public weigh in on this so we all get a sense from our constituents on what they feel about this. Because I think all this discussion is heady discussion. It's very important discussion, and misinformation is the worst thing we can do with that. So if our constituents are informed, or if they have the opportunity to be informed on what's going on, we're going to be better in representing them. Let's do that. Let's give it first reading, and then come back and see how this plays out with our public hearings on going to our constituents.
That's agree.
Councilmember Appel.
Real quick on this.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the democratic process, getting out in the community and talking to people. I don't think we're even close to being in a position to do that. This reminds me of when we sent Matt to John's Island to go have a public hearing on the stormwater manual. I mean, honestly, I don't think we ever should have had a public hearing on the stormwater manual. It's a technical document that is enormous. I don't think anybody, respectfully, and if I'm thinking of my colleagues that take full responsibility, nobody understands the ins and outs of those complexities, and we don't need to, really. That's what our staff and our experts are for. If we're going to go to the community on this issue, I want to have a 2-page or 4-page or whatever, how many page document we can provide to the community with facts. Until we have that, going to the community makes no sense on this issue because it's extremely complex. It's extremely complex. And we just are going to start winding ourselves up into major knots. And the good news is we got all the information. Let's just put it all together and let's go out and gather the feedback.
All right. Last shot, last call. Motion to defer. Councilmember Griffin.
Go to the community whenever it is time. We let them know that we've already passed part of it and explain all of that as well.
You're right.
So
absolutely. I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Don't remember the last time that happened.
Rare moment in history.
But anyway, people need to know we've already passed one part, and so it's not a completely fresh idea. And so when we go out to the community, they need to know, really, we're in agreement on one part of it, but we've got this bigger thing that we're still looking at.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to defer this matter. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Okay, so can the ayes who just
Call a
voted-
roll call, please.
Yes, let me do a roll call vote. Okay. Councilwoman Del Chapo? Councilmember Shealy? That's right. Councilmember Saccharin?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell? Councilmember Brady?
Nay.
Councilmember Gregory?
Yay.
Yay?
Yay.
I've heard the nays, I had to get that yay. Okay. Councilmember Waring? Councilmember Seeking?
Aye.
Councilmember Shade?
No.
Councilmember Griffin?
Yes.
Councilmember Appel?
Nay.
Councilwoman Jackson?
Nay.
Mayor Tecklenburg?
Nay. So the nays carry. The motion is still on the floor to give first reading to the matter.
Question. Call the question.
I would like to make a comment myself and share with y'all that the overriding purpose about this whole matter, both new construction and existing, is for long-term protection from flooding and sea level rise. I don't want us to lose sight on the ultimate reason why this whole thing was brought forward. I know there's been discussion about going further than what our neighboring jurisdictions have done. I'd even welcome maybe in the future a motion to go to 3 feet. But I do believe from the development community that it would be good to be consistent with the county and Mount Pleasant and North Charleston. Everybody's at 2 feet for everything. This would make us consistent with them. This would also take the uncertainty out of us getting the extra CRS points, which will save over $1 million citywide for our policyholders for flood insurance. This is only applicable in special flood protection areas and not everywhere. It's over half of our city, I admit, but it's not everywhere. Citizens are already required, we've had a long discussion about this before, to go to freeboard +1. So what we're doing is just adding one more foot. It's a delta. If a big disaster occurred, we've all seen that FEMA will come forward and help our citizens. I know there's a good thought to create our own fund to help citizens in need when this occasion would arise, that they would have to elevate their home or to meet this requirement. I do want to share with y'all a very good possibility. It hadn't passed yet, but it's part of the state budget. The head of the Ways and Means, Merle Smith, brought this forward, a disaster relief and resilience reserve fund that will be funded with $50 million this year by the state of South Carolina. And the second provision of this statewide fund is in fact for infrastructure repairs for homeowners that are not eligible for other grants like disaster recovery and federal funding assistance. So not only can we explore the city having such a thing, but the state government is doing that as well. So I would support first reading tonight, and I do agree that we should have a further conversation about Phil getting us there, and that's a valid discussion that needs to occur, and that we ought to get all our facts together and go to the public with this before giving second and third reading. So I just wanted to add my remarks. Council. Yes, sir.
In the essence of the public housing, what role would they play if this happened?
So
I know they're federal, they're under federal, but they're public housing, they're not owned by, they're not homeowners, so to speak, but they're owned by someone. So with this, passing this, and if they're in the flood hazard area, just like my house is
That's right.
also.
So
What's going to happen to them? How are they going to
the same rules would apply if they wanted to renovate Gadsden Green, and the renovation were more than 50% of the value of the property, they would have to elevate.
That's why I'm saying, how would they lift the housing complex up and they're low on the ground as it is now? They are low on the ground. I mean, all the public housing. They're on the slab. They're on the slab, So how would they lift those?
In some cases, I might propose that it would be easier and better to start all over again, depending on the condition of the property. But they'll have to follow, they have to follow that right now. They're in the same trap. They got to go to freeboard +1 now. I bet Gadsden Green is, I don't know if it's where it stands in terms of its flood elevation, so I hate to even say, but any property right now below freeboard +1, if they had a substantial renovation, would have to come up if they're in a special flood protection area. All right, Councilmember Ware.
I have a question about council. When we, Ms. Herdina, could you come to the microphone, please? We depend a good bit on FEMA on this for funding. Over in, what's the area in your district that the townhouses that we bought? What was Bridgepoint? We voted for the city match on that when Mayor Riley was mayor.
We had a 10% match?
I know, but we voted for that.
Are you talking about the ones we just closed on?
That's right. That's right. We voted for that in 2015 for the city to put money up as we applied for the federal grant. How long did it take? How long did it take for applying for the grant and eventually buyout for these the people? How long did it take? How many years did it take?
Stephen would know best.
Steve's probably in a better position to answer that.
Way too long.
No, seriously, I mean, I don't want to be just with this. How long did it take?
It took about 3 years.
About 3 years.
From the event, from the flooding event until they were gone.
Until they were gone, okay.
Yeah.
Now, hypothetically, we have a superstorm that hits Charleston. Every house that's on a slab cannot be lifted, okay? And there are a lot of homes on slabs on grade in the city of Charleston. Our dependence is going to be on FEMA coming forward or the federal government coming forward to help these people out. FEMA on requirement is to bring it up to what height, Mr. Joker?
To the base flood elevation.
And how does FEMA determine that? Is it 14 and a half? Is it 15 and a half? What is FEMA?
The base flood elevation is tied to the specific flood zone that's shown on the flood insurance rate map.
Is FEMA's requirement 14 and a half or 15 and a half?
It's different in every flood zone.
Our requirements are higher than FEMA's, I understand. I'm asking Mr. Joker. Okay.
That's right. Our current requirement is 1 foot above the base flood elevation.
All right. And on new construction, we've already voted to go to 2.
That's right.
Now, we placating the subject saying that FEMA and the federal government and the state will come up with potentially $50 million. And when these superstorms come through, they do billions of dollars worth of damage. Billions of dollars worth of damage. So I hear you, Mr. Brady, on the city potentially coming up with monies to do it. But financially, we flat out don't have the money. Our whole budget is about, Matt, about 226 million, something like that. We dedicated the whole 226 million if a superstorm would have hit. It wouldn't be enough money. And we always talk about points for flood insurance. if we're going to do the facts on this, let's don't run a campaign. Campaign is over with. As a matter of fact, we all deferred this until after the campaign. Brilliant. And I deferred it because I wanted a factual discussion and did not want a campaign because it affects so many people in our district, in our city. So when you're talking about helping people lift their homes, you're talking about a major expense that we're assigning to people and they don't even know it. And they have to have an endorsement on their policy to pay for that. When we increase the cost of construction, the cost of homeowners insurance increases as well. We have not done a good job bringing forth the facts on that. We have talked consistently about a 4 to 5% discount on flood insurance. Flood insurance covers one peril, that's flooding. Flood insurance does not cover the many perils that a homeowners insurance policy covers. So hypothetically, it's not hypothetical, if you increase the cost of construction, if you increase the cost of replacement, homeowners' premiums will rise. We have not heard one penny of what that increase would be. And homeowners insurance, in most cases, is higher than the flood insurance. So if the homeowners policy increases, that increase is going to impact the homeowner much more than the increase on the flood insurance, or the 5% that they're going to save deduction on the flood insurance. We're doing a lot of effort to save on flood insurance, looking straight past what it's going to cost many people who are on fixed incomes on their homeowners insurance. So I understand we have a difference on this, but you're talking about houses being boarded up for years before people can get back in their own homes. If it was just I brought that in the committee. I've been to the Ninth Ward. I've seen the desolate neighborhoods with the houses boarded up. Can you imagine Charleston being boarded up like that, even if it were just for 3 years? I can tell you, those people in Bridgeport certainly knew that was an eternity. They couldn't buy another house in some cases until they got their claim solved to get money to go forward. Now let's extrapolate that potentially over 1,000 homes, just 1,000 houses. We have not thought this through. Sounds great in the campaign. We carried up to 20 feet. We haven't even heard from, I'm surprised the people from the disabilities hadn't come in. How high will the handicap ramps have to be? They will look like roller coasters in some neighborhoods. Councilman Seekings is right. In some of his district, in areas in his district, it may be 5 or 6 feet they have to come up. So if you're disabled in that case, that means that you have to get an elevator? Will a handicap ramp do if you're 6 feet off the ground? We haven't thought this through. But we're willing to assign the cost to people and they don't know that cost is coming. So I appreciate for having the time to hear myself, because this one is not a campaign issue. Because if it were a campaign issue, and we truly explain this to the homeowners and the voters out there, many of us would not be back on this council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? All in favor of the motion just for first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Roll call, please.
On my sheet again. Councilmember Del Chapo, Councilwoman Del Chapo. You know, we've been here so long, so. And I'm cold. You're what? Nay. Nay, okay. Councilmember Shealy? Okay. Councilmember Saccharin? Nay. Councilmember Mitchell? Councilmember Brady?
Aye.
Councilmember Gregory? What? Councilmember Waring? Councilmember Seekings?
Aye.
Councilmember Shade?
Yes.
Councilmember Griffin? Councilmember Appel?
Yes.
Councilwoman Jackson?
Yes.
Mayor Tecklenburg?
Yes. I think the motion failed.
It does.
Yeah.
7, you're right.
All right. So I appreciate the fact that we got new construction passed and we got a decision on existing construction. So thank y'all for that. Next, we're going to have a little executive session regarding West Edge development. I guess we'll reconvene in my office. Thanks to Rick Giroux. We do have some toasty crackers for supper.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I think we're also going to discuss the fire station.
And we're also going to discuss one other matter from Ways and Means. Okay. So we'll take it.
We need a motion.
We have a motion to go into executive session and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We will take a 3-minute break getting there if anybody needs to take a little visit on the way there.
Just say Chick-fil-A, is that where you're going?
All right, can I entertain a motion to come out of executive session? We got such a motion. All in favor to come out of executive session, say aye. Any opposed? Let the record show that no action was taken while we were in executive session. Can I entertain a motion to approve the item that was on Ways and Means that we deferred? I got a motion and a second to approve that $0 contract amendment, construction amendment for...
Mayor, I think we just have to make a motion to reopen Ways and Means.
Okay.
Suspend it, so I think we need to do that
Okay.
first. And Jennifer's got a comment.
Okay. We're going to have a motion to reopen Ways and Means Committee. Okay. We're going to, can I entertain a motion to recess City Council meeting and re-adjourn Ways and Means? So moved. All in favor? Now, Mr. Chairman, would you please come forward and conduct the rest of your meeting?
You lost. I heard a motion already. Okay. Any discussion?
No, we need to
make the motion. Okay. Do I hear a motion? For. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay.
Roll call at all. I got one.
Thank you. Third roll call. Okay. All right. Councilwoman Del Topo. Councilmember Shealy. Councilmember Sacred. Councilmember Mitchell. Councilmember Brady. Councilmember Gregory. Councilmember Waring. Councilmember Seeking. Councilmember Shea.
Yes.
Councilmember Griffin. Councilmember Appel. Councilwoman Jackson. Yes. Mayor Tecklenburg.
Yes.
Okay, the nays. So what is that? We do have 9 nays.
All right, adjourn Ways and Means.
Anything else you brought up was that's just Ways and Means now.
Good job. Then we're going to recount city council and then city council votes on the same item.
All right, can I, City Council is hereby reconvened, and we just need to affirm the vote of the committee report from Ways and Means. So, Mr. Chairman, you want to ask for a confirmation of your committee? Yeah, just like we... Yes, we do. City Council now needs to affirm what the Ways and Means Committee passed. Can I have a motion to do that? Yeah. Right, yeah. Then we're adopting their report, which includes... Right. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We stand adjourned.